The spotlight is on historic race that's down to the final two.
Donald Trump is telling a whole lot of lies.
If you want a losing candidate who puts America last, vote for Nikki Haley.
With a head-to-head fight and a big win behind him, will the GOP frontrunner seal the deal?
We need big margins. We have to set the tone for November.
It's New Hampshire's choice. Tonight, a pivotal presidential primary. Donald Trump aiming for a knockout punch against the only opponent still in his way.
She's not tough enough. She's not smart enough. She cannot do this job.
Nikki Haley putting it all on the line in New Hampshire as she tries to put the brakes on Trump.
Who lost the House for us? Who lost the Senate? Who lost the White House? Donald Trump, Donald Trump, Donald Trump.
Will the former president, with a divisive record and facing criminal charges, get another step closer to his ultimate goal?
This could end it. Get the big vote, it ends it. Then we could focus on Biden.
Our campaign is the last best hope of stopping the Trump-Biden nightmare.
Now, it's time for voters to have their say, with the power to shake up the race.
The Granite State has put political pundits to shame so many times.
Or help catapult Trump toward the nomination.
You'll be able to vote for your all-time favorite president, me.
It's New Hampshire's turn, and voting is underway across the state right now.
Take a look, a live view of the New Hampshire Capitol as voters across the state are putting their stamp on the Republican presidential race. They're casting ballots in the first primary of 2024, a contest that could be decisive in the fight for the GOP nomination. Welcome to CNN's live special coverage of the New Hampshire primary. I'm Anderson Cooper.
And I'm Jake Tapper in the CNN Election Center. Most polling places across New Hampshire close less than an hour from now, and then the early results will start coming in. Stakes are enormous for the last two major Republican presidential candidates left standing. Donald Trump seeking a decisive win over Nikki Haley that could potentially end her White House hopes. Haley hoping to defy expectations, pull off a strong showing in a state that has historically delivered upsets. That would propel her campaign forward. On the Democratic side, there's an effort to write in President Joe Biden's name in a contest that will not be awarding any delegates, but that does not mean there's nothing at stake. Minnesota Congressman Dean Phillips and author Marianne Williamson are trying to peel away Biden's support within the Democratic Party, hoping to drive home their concerns that his reelection bid is weak. As we count down to results on this very important primary night, our anchors and correspondents are at key locations across New Hampshire, covering the candidates and tracking the votes as they're cast and counted. Right now, let's bring in my colleague Dana Batch in Manchester, New Hampshire. And Dana, you spent a lot of time in New Hampshire. What stands out to you on this primary night?
Well, Jake, the thing to keep in mind about tonight is voters here in New Hampshire make up the most unique electorate in the entire presidential nominating process. That's why we've covered so many contests here over the years, from 2000 and John McCain, 2008 with Hillary Clinton, where New Hampshire voters really surprise everyone. There are a lot of reasons for that, but one of the most important reasons is that New Hampshire has a really large amount of independent voters. Here they call them undeclared voters. Nikki Haley's campaign is really relying on those undeclared voters to come through for her here tonight. Now, I'm told in her campaign's internal modeling, what they are looking for is a share of that vote to be at least 47%. So 47% of undeclared voters for her to have a really good night. And in our exit poll, which David Chalian showed us earlier this evening, it was exactly that. 47% of the voters are undeclared. That's an early good sign for Team Haley. Now, Jake, in the Donald Trump campaign, they, of course, are hoping to get a large enough margin to make it uncomfortable for Nikki Haley to stay in the race. One area that Team Trump tells me that they're watching tonight, sort of as a bellwether, is the wealthy Manchester suburb of Bedford, that if Haley runs up the vote total there, she will have a good night. And you know New Hampshire well, Jake, the weather here for January is relatively warm today, and that's why the Secretary of State predicted turnout is higher than normal and could be really high by historical standards. We'll see if that bears out shortly.
Yeah, that's balmy for a January in New Hampshire. Dana Bash, thanks so much. Let's go to CNN's Kristen Holmes, who is covering the Trump campaign and is at Trump campaign headquarters in Nashua, New Hampshire. Kristen, how confident is the Trump team?
Jake, this is a completely different attitude than I saw for the last 2 weeks. They are very confident going into tonight. They believe that they could win by double digits, but I am told by a senior advisor that anything over 7% margin, they believe will be a clear and resounding victory. Now, again, this is very different from what we saw the last several weeks. They've been watching Haley's poll numbers closely. And as Dana mentioned, because of the large amount of independent voters that can vote in a Republican primary, they were genuinely concerned as to what was going to happen. They spent millions of dollars between the campaign and the super PAC hitting Nikki Haley on two issues, immigration and Social Security. Hitting her on immigration because the Trump campaign believes that that is the most important issue to Republicans here in New Hampshire. They were trying to solidify those conservative votes, and hitting her on Social Security to try and lessen her appeal to independent voters. Tonight, Jake, we will find out whether or not their strategy paid off.
All right, Kristen Holmes at Trump campaign headquarters in Nashua, New Hampshire. Now let's go to a key voting site in Nashua, New Hampshire. Kate Baldwin is there. Kate, tell us what's going on where you are.
So polls here close later than most of the rest of the state. The polls close at 8 p.m. here in Nashua at Ward 3. And what you're looking at, what we've been able to gain access to, is the final step in the process for voters. After they've gotten their ballot, after they've gone behind the privacy screens to make their choices. This black box, this is the ballot box. This is where the voters, this is their final step. They insert it into the box, and then that is that. The latest count that I've been able to get is there have been 1,987 votes cast. For some context, Jake, here in Ward 3, there are just under 5,000 registered voters. There's still time to go. It's been very busy the last, I would say, 40 minutes here, as obviously people are getting off work and they're coming in to cast their ballots. So this is a well-oiled machine here. They are coming through quickly. At 8 o'clock, what's going to happen is Jed, the ward moderator, he's going to be able to hit that tabulating button. And that is when you're going to get the totals, the unofficial and incomplete totals, but the first read on where this ward is going to be going. After that, then they have to go through the process of going through and sifting through all of the ballots that require hand counting. That could be write-ins, as we know people are concerned about needing to do going through a lot of write-in ballots because of Joe Biden, but that part of the process will then take some more time. Come with me though, because after this, the voters come out here, they leave, and we have a voter with us right here. Carmene's going to come here. Justin, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Who'd you vote for today?
I voted for Nikki Haley.
And you were undeclared?
Yes.
Why did you vote for Nikki Haley?
Because I think that Donald Trump is more of an existential threat than the Republican Party at large. So I voted for Nikki as a vote against Trump.
Vote against Trump. Justin, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time. Jake, back to you.
All right, Kate Baldwin in Nashua, New Hampshire, about 1,800 votes cast so far there in a state where there are about 877,000 overall registered voters, I believe. David Chalian's breaking down our New Hampshire exit polls now. David, how do New Hampshire voters feel about Donald Trump according to the exit poll?
Well, we see a big difference in this electorate compared to Iowa, Jake. And I just want to note, these are early preliminary exit poll findings. These numbers are going to change throughout the evening as more surveys come in. But we asked this question, do you consider yourself part of the MAGA movement? Take a look here. 32% of New Hampshire Republican primary voters say yes, they do. 64% say no. Jake, this was nearly half and half in Iowa last week. Here, 2/3 of voters tonight in the Republican primary say they don't consider themselves MAGA Republicans. Do you think Joe Biden legitimately won the 2020 election, which he did? It's split half and half. 49% say yes. 49% of primary voters today say no. Again, in Iowa last week, 2/3 of Republican caucus goers said Biden did not legitimately win, though he did. Big difference in the electorate. Is Donald Trump fit for the presidency, even if he's convicted of a crime? Today in New Hampshire, Republican primary voters, half of them say yes. He is still fit for the presidency, even if he's a convicted criminal. No, 47% of voters today say no. Again, big difference from the 2/3 who said yes in Iowa last week. And then we asked overall, no matter who you're supporting tonight, Will you be satisfied or dissatisfied if Donald Trump wins the nomination? 56% of Republican primary voters tonight in New Hampshire, no matter who they support, say they will be satisfied if Trump's the nominee. But this number here, 43% will be dissatisfied. That shows the work ahead for Donald Trump if he becomes the nominee, that he will have to do some healing within the party, Jake.
Very interesting, David Chalian. Thank you so much. And I suppose it is a sign of the times, Aaron Burnett, that it is good news that only half of the Republican electorate believes the lie about the 2020 election, and the other half is actually reality-based.
I mean, it is the incredible thing, right? You look at it and say, oh, does that put a ceiling for Trump tonight? And then you take a step back and say, wow, half of a population that includes undeclared voters thinks that the election was stolen. Glass half full or glass half empty. You know, as you look at what is happening right now, though, Jake, these exit poll numbers that we have, Caitlin, from your sources in Trump world, how do they see these numbers so far? Specifically, some of those things that David was just saying that, at least on the face of it, don't look great for him right now.
I mean, I think the most remarkable was that 50% said that they still think he's fit for office, even if he's a convicted felon. And 47% only said no. I mean, when you look at what Republicans are saying, a lot of people who have been voting for Nikki Haley, just anecdotally speaking, have said it's a vote against Donald Trump. But a lot of Republicans, even those who are her biggest surrogates, have said they'll still vote for Trump, even if he is a convicted felon, including the governor of New Hampshire, Chris Sununu. But I think what the Trump team is
including
hoping...
Nikki Haley.
Including Nikki Haley.
She put her hand up. Yeah.
It's very, very few Republicans who say that they're backing someone else that say they still wouldn't ultimately vote for him over Joe Biden. But the Trump campaign is walking into this tonight. They want to end the 2024 primary race. Right. Trump said earlier he doesn't care if Nikki Haley drops out or not, depending on how tonight goes. His political advisors very much do, because they understand that if she gets out of the race tonight, then it turns to the general election and they can start focusing their attention, but also their dollars and their resources on that general election. And that is something that they're eager to do and not instead have this drag out for 3 more weeks. Now, that's walking into this with an air of confidence after Iowa last week. We don't know yet what the voters are going to decide, so they're obviously having to watch that as well.
And look, this is an electorate here that is probably as favorable as it's going to get for Nikki Haley. It's more moderate. New Hampshire is a state that likes to kind of countervail the conventional wisdom. However, as we look at these exit poll numbers, as Caitlin pointed out, those last 2 questions, how people would feel if Trump won the nomination and whether or not he would be fit for the presidency, those are actually 2 numbers that you would not necessarily expect them to be in Trump's favor, but they are. And as we go through this night, we just need to keep in mind that Trump has already been showing some inroads with some constituencies that in the past he has really struggled with, suburban people, women in particular. And so we cannot assume that just because it's a more moderate environment that he is going to struggle more. We may be seeing shifting happening in this Republican electorate as we've been seeing over the course of his entire tenure in American politics.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be the big question about the strength of Trump's coalition and his viability as a general election candidate on those suburban voters, on people who are much more moderate. Polls coming in have clearly shown that Haley is dominating with those more moderate voters. But back in 2016, when Trump won this primary and barely lost in the general election, he dominated among conservative voters and in more moderate voters, according to the exit polls at the time. Is that the case now? And how much ground does he have to make up? Because Iowa's one thing, but New Hampshire will be contested in the general election. There are 4 electoral votes that could potentially decide a very close election here. So Donald Trump's ability to expand hit beyond very conservative voters is going to be key.
Interesting how strongly some of these voters, Jake, hold their opinions.
Yeah.
What was it when Nikki Haley spoke to Dana earlier today? Twice she said, I think that he's fit for office, talking about Trump. And then once she said, well, of course, I wouldn't be running if I thought he was fit. But you even get that confusion from Nikki Haley herself.
Yeah, although I have to say, I mean, as David Chalian pointed out, trouble signs for Donald Trump, even if he were to win tonight. 43% of the electorate, according to these early exit polls, saying they would not be satisfied if Trump would be the nominee. I mean, that is a place that the Biden campaign will go. And remember, New Hampshire is a state that went for Biden over Donald Trump. Aaron Burnett, we expect votes to start coming in after the top of the hour. Once most polling places close across the Granite State, we're going to keep an eye on last-minute turnout. We're going to take you inside another key voting site in a second, our live coverage of the New Hampshire primary. It's just getting started. Stick with us.
I come from MAGA world. I was a MAGA base cult member, baby. I was part of that world, and I left that world, and now, am an opponent of Trump's. Most of the Never Trumpers were never part of that MAGA cult. I was. True. I voted for Trump in 2016 because the same people who voted for him voted for me. I felt like Trump did. The system's fucking broken. Burn it down. Both parties suck. I wanted, Adam, maybe you did too, I wanted disruption in our political system. I think disruption's good. Yeah. Turns out Trump is an evil disruptor. And I did not pay enough attention to that. Once he got elected, I started paying attention to him. And even though Helsinki was my final straw, a month into his presidency, I came home from doing my radio show, sat down at dinner with my wife. I looked at her and I said, this isn't going to end well for us.
When it comes to the faith side of things, I still hold my faith very dear. And the reason is look, I think my faith has been so perverted, by the way. Donald Trump has been turned into the new Jesus Christ. He's the new moral stick everybody measures up against. And my belief is look, you have to treat the Jesus of the Bible I grew up reading actually treated the poor very compassionately. He had compassion for immigrants. He actually, wasn't obsessed with politics. This is, by the way, a fairly new journey of my life, is recognizing that you can be a Christian in politics, or you can be a religious person in politics, but you don't bring your religion to politics. I've always known that part. I was a man of faith in a secular position, so I have to act like that. But this has been so perverted and turned into Christian nationalism. And what I saw, I can look back at 1992 and see, I went to the Christian Coalition meeting, which was basically you had in essence, a failure of the moral majority, which was Falwell's group. And then the Christian Coalition was Pat Robertson's answer to that. And this was the first time that George H.W. Bush came and actually spoke to the group. And it was the first time that you really saw mainstream Republican politics openly court evangelicals. Now, look, even at the thing, he said, we don't want to go back to the days of Ozzie and Harriet. So he held true to what he really believed. But that was an open signal to the Christian right that we need you, you're part of this movement. And that's fine until the Christian right made a decision to take over the party. And that's what's happened over the last, frankly, 15 years. And I can look back and see the different iterations of that. But now we're in a moment where, my goodness, the GOP doesn't represent the GOP that you and I remember. It doesn't represent the party of fiscal discipline. It's the party of let's make somehow Christianity the national religion, but it's not a true Christianity.
Man, I come from the Republican Party, and the Mitt Romneys of the world and the John McCains of the world fucking laughed at these hardcore base people in the party. And when they complained and worried about the border, and when they complained and worried about, marriage and all these genders, instead of sitting them down and educating them, they dismissed them. And then along came a demagogue, Adam, and he fed them a bunch of bullshit. So now they cling to that demagogue.
My assumption, I think it was everybody's assumption, which is if you present people with facts, they're going to come to the right conclusion. What I've come to realize is if we truly see the Republican Party as a cult, and I think that's a pretty good analogy, to be honest with you, because, what do cults do? If somebody goes outside of the cult, whether it's Liz or I or, Mitt Romney, whatever, what do? You get demonized, you get ostracized, you get put aside, because that has to be a warning to other cult members. Don't challenge the current orthodoxy, or this will happen to you. And Adam, the thing that I have come to realize that people fear more than they fear death is being kicked out of their tribe.
And we're back with our live coverage of the New Hampshire primary with ballot cams capturing the action at key polling places. This is the second Republican presidential contest of 2024. It could effectively decide the fight for the nomination. John Berman is in Manchester, New Hampshire right now inside a polling place. John, what kind of a turnout are you seeing there?
Well, right now, Jake, actually, there's no line at all in Manchester Ward 6. Manchester, the most populous city in the state of New Hampshire. The turnout, I'd say, has been robust, maybe not earth-shattering. Come on in. The water is warm here. When people do show up, they come here to this table. See my favorite poll worker, Sheila, here. And they have to decide what primary they're voting in. You get a blue slip if you're going to vote in the Democratic primary, a pink slip if you're going to vote in the Republican primary. Remember, undeclared voters can choose which primary they vote in. And I've been told by far the majority of voters today are voting in the Republican primary, which isn't surprising, of course, because President Biden not even competing in the Democratic primary. Now, Jake, you asked me about turnout. If you look at this black machine over here, that is where all the ballots go. We can't shoot the ballots themselves, but that's the machine that counts and tabulates the ballots. And when these voters are done feeding their ballots into the machine, I can give you a live look at how many voters have cast a ballot. All right, that voter's going to put their ballot in. And Stuart, why don't you come over here? Let's shoot this number right here. If you can push in right there, as of 6:21 p.m., 2,736 voters have cast ballots in Manchester Ward 6. 2,700. The record here is 3,700. Now, what isn't known is how many are Democratic ballots, how many are Republican ballots. More than 2,100 will be a record for Republicans. I've been told there are a lot of write-in ballots. You want to know how many? I was told by the moderator here, that many. A visual demonstration of a stack of ballots that high for write-ins here. Now, once voters vote, they come outside of the hallway, and we are allowed to talk to them. Hi, how are you? I'm okay. There's a voter right here. What's your name?
Judy.
Judy. You cast your ballot in the First in the Nation primary. Who'd you vote for?
I voted for President Trump
You voted for Donald Trump. Why?
because we had 4 amazing years. We had no wars for 4 years. We had energy independence. We had safe borders. We were taking care of our veterans.
Are you an undeclared voter or a registered Republican?
I'm a registered Republican.
Who'd you vote for 8 years ago? If you were here in 2016, do you remember?
I voted for Trump.
You're a hardcore Donald Trump voter turning out here in Manchester Ward 6. Great to see you. Thank you so much. Now, Donald Trump in 2016, when this was a competitive primary, he won this ward by about 20 points. So you would expect to see a lot of voters like that picking up here. We will wait and see at the end of the night how he does. Jake?
All right, John Berman in Manchester, New Hampshire. Let's go to the Magic Wall now and talk to John King about where the votes are and where we're looking, especially tonight. John, earlier, Dana Bash said that Nikki Haley's folks are keeping an eye out for I think it was the Bedford suburb of Manchester, New Hampshire. Where are you looking?
That's one of the places we will look. Let me walk through it just for people who maybe didn't follow overnight. You see that filled in there. You see that number there. 6 votes were cast at midnight as tradition in Dixville Notch. Nikki Haley got them all. So you see she already has the only votes that have been counted. It's probably visually a stunner to people to see we have votes already. So where was John Berman? He was in Manchester. This is one place we're going to watch because, as he noted, it's the most populous city in the state. It also is a very gritty, blue-collar place where Donald Trump, you just heard that voter, tends to do well. So there's a lot of people and a lot of Trump voters. Very key. Manchester, absolutely key to Donald Trump. So what did Dana mention? She mentioned Bedford. It's the neighboring suburb. It's just outside of Manchester. If you're familiar with Manchester, you come southern part of the city, you see the New Hampshire Mall, off you go into more leafy, beautiful Bedford. Now, why are they worried about that? Right? I just want to go back in time. Number one, 12th most populous township in the state, so a decent amount of people there. Number one. Number two, though, if you go back to 2016, the Republican primary, Trump won it. But he only got 28% of the vote if you round that up there. And remember, in 2016, Donald Trump won the suburbs, often in the primaries, including in New Hampshire, and then narrowly against Hillary Clinton in the general election. It has been since then, 2018, 2020, 2022. We saw the suburbs revolt against Donald Trump. Now, these are Republicans, but also undeclared voters. So it is a great test. A lot of independents in the suburbs. So as Dana points that out, it's one of the places we'll watch. So let's come back. This is the 2016 map. Worth remembering, this is Nikki Haley's best chance because undeclared voters can stay. Also worth remembering, Donald Trump won this state. This was his first win in 2016. So he's not weak in New Hampshire. He's actually quite strong. So it's Haley's best demographic, meaning undeclared people can vote. And the Republican electorate tends to be more moderate than, say, an Iowa or a South Carolina. But it's still a strong Donald Trump state. So come back here, just one more quick point, and then you ask anything you want. You always look for places that have a history of getting it right? David Chalian sent me a note this morning. I'm walking through some of that, checking it out myself. So here's one up here in the north, right? One of the things you want to look at is throughout the diversity of the state. In the rural north, Lancaster, little small town, 106 to the 260, so it's right in there in terms of population. They've gotten it right in every New Hampshire Republican primary for 70 years. So it's a place you keep your eye on. Just one more. We come out to the coast right here.
Might be the same 20 people, just getting it right every time.
Just above, this is Dover here. You come down below Dover and Newington along the coast here. You're going to watch as well because this is where the people are. One last quick thing. We'll just show you these counties. The counties that are now the lightest gray, those are your suburban counties. Trump did well in those counties in 2016. Absolutely essential to Nikki Haley right down here tonight.
All right, John King, it's crunch time in New Hampshire. Most polling places are set to close at the top of the hour. Stay right here as we track every vote and bring you all the up-to-the-minute results on this momentous night in the 2024 election.
Man, I come from the Republican Party, and the Mitt Romneys of the world and the John McCains of the world fucking laughed at these hardcore base people in the party. And when they complained and worried about the border, and when they complained and worried about, marriage and all these genders, instead of sitting them down and educating them, they dismissed them. And then along came a demagogue at them, and he fed them a bunch of bullshit. So now they cling to that demagogue.
I believe if we quantum leap like 10 years forward, which is a great show, by the way, but if we do that and we look back and we say, okay, what do you believe about January 6th? Like in 10 years, nobody's going to believe any of the garbage about the lies. They're going to believe the truth. But right now, that tribal tattoo is it was an inside job or whatever. So let's not get discouraged about that. Let's understand that that's what's driving this and know that the number one goal, the only way to overcome this is not with more facts, though we need to keep getting facts out there. I don't mean to denigrate that. It's with defeating the insurrectionists in November. And that means people like Adam Epstein and I have to belong to a party that maybe we don't always belong to because we have to defeat the insurrectionists.
Absolutely.
As soon as the decision came down, Vice President Gore told his staff, don't trust the Supreme Court. That's more important than this election. Mm-hmm. Which, I've won elections, I've lost elections. Losing an election like that and can't lose a closer election. I mean,
right. 537 votes in Florida.
And the Supreme Court. And the anger and bitterness and exhaustion that you have that would push you to saying something intemperate is really extraordinary that he was able to put what he saw correctly as the interests of the country above that. Mm-hmm. And it was really a heroic moment. I think one of the interesting moments now in our politics is I think the Democratic Party has a real opportunity to reclaim some of that strong on foreign policy. Yep. And if they do, it'll be transformational.
Right.
It's just fascinating. I mean, who is it that gets on a plane and goes to Taiwan? Nancy Pelosi.
I know.
Who is it that gets on a plane, flies to Warsaw, takes a 10-hour train and gets, the first American president in a war zone that we didn't control in history to stand by the Ukrainian people, a Democratic president, and putting together a coalition that really is saving the Western world. My dad was an FBI agent in Manhattan when the war broke out. There's a guy from Mississippi who went to Ole Miss Law School. This is when all FBI agents had to be lawyers or accountants. They may still be, I don't know.
Yeah.
Having the time of his life, sort of chasing would-be German spies and going to the theater every night. And that order came down to round up Asian Americans. And he did it for a day, and then he quit. And enlisted in the Navy, spent 3 years fighting in the South Pacific, 28 island landings, and never regretted it. Lost a lot of friends, never regretted it. And, he didn't talk about the war much like so many of those guys.
Yeah.
But he told me, one thing, he says, you can always say no.
It is primary night in New Hampshire. Time is running out for voters to weigh in on what is now a head-to-head fight for the Republican presidential nomination, Donald Trump versus Nikki Haley. Let's go over to Kylie Atwood now. She's at Nikki Haley's campaign headquarters in the New Hampshire capital of Concord. Kylie, so much at stake tonight. What are you hearing from the campaign?
Well, listen, this is one of the most consequential days of Nikki Haley's political career to date. And those around her and Haley herself, they're projecting confidence and optimism. I spoke with campaign aides today who say that folks are feeling good. One of those aides said that they felt really good about the energy that they have seen in New Hampshire over the last week. They think that Haley is going to outperform some of the recent polls, with one aide telling me they believe that she's going to come within 15 points of former President Trump. Of course, we'll have to wait and see what it actually shakes out and looks like. But sources close to the campaign acknowledge that the stakes are incredibly high for her. The campaign says that Haley is feeling good, that she's trying to have fun out there on the campaign trail. And notably, it's important to note that she is around people that she feels comfortable with. That was the case in Iowa. It's the case here in New Hampshire. She's with aides who have been with her, some of them for more than a decade now. And she's also been on the trail, and she's tonight with members of her family as they begin to track these votes coming in New Hampshire.
All right, Kylie Atwood at Nikki Haley headquarters in Concord, New Hampshire. As voting continues in the Granite State, let's check in with Boris Sanchez. He's at a polling place in Belmont, New Hampshire, outside Manchester, that we've heard the Haley campaign is paying a lot of attention to tonight. Boris Sanchez, tell us what you're seeing.
Absolutely, Jake. We're only about 20-ish minutes or so from this polling location closing, and turnout has exceeded expectations here. At last check, it eclipsed what the turnout was back in the 2020 primary. Very quickly, I just want to go to our friend Tom. Tom, could you quickly give us a read on what the number of ballots cast is right now?
Right now, we're at 2,371.
2,371. The peak, the record-setting primary was back in 2016. That was about 2,600 votes at this location. So you can imagine that is a strong sign of where turnout and enthusiasm is. Very quickly, I want to respect the rules of the primary and get you outside so we can have a conversation with two folks, Trump supporters, a husband and wife. She's in law enforcement. They both believe that Donald Trump would be best when it comes to public safety and the issue of education. Thank you both for being with us. Remind me of your names.
Vanessa.
And Doug.
And at one point, Vanessa, you were telling me earlier, you supported Donald Trump in 2016 and in 2020, but there was something about Ron DeSantis that caught your eye. Ultimately, you chose to go with Trump. Why?
That is correct. So DeSantis in the beginning was telling me all the things I wanted to know about our country and how it was going to get better and improvements and how he was going to go about getting resources to make that happen. But then somewhere along the way, later on in this campaigning, he wasn't giving me so much the how as I'm going to. I need to know the how, the when, the whys, and Donald Trump is giving me that.
And Doug, did you ever consider voting for somebody else, perhaps Nikki Haley?
No. I've always been a Trump supporter.
The big question, of course, what happens if he potentially gets convicted? Do you still support him in the general election?
I do. I don't believe the convictions will stick.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if he's convicted, it's still political in my view that he was attacked. He's never been indicted on, what happened back on January 6th. So at this point, he's innocent in my eyes until proven guilty.
Doug and Vanessa, we very much appreciate you sharing your perspective with us. Thank you for being patient. Jake, we'll send it back to you.
All right, Boris Sanchez, thank you so much. Now let's go to David Chalian, who has more on our exit polls and specifically the differences between Haley voters and Trump voters.
Yeah, Jake, one of the questions we ask is sort of, are you out there voting because you so strongly support your candidate, or are you voting because you really dislike the opponent? Among Trump voters in the New Hampshire Republican primary today, 77% tell us they're voting for Trump because they strongly favor his candidacy. This is part of that bond Trump has with his voters. 19% says they like him, but they have some reservations. Only 3% are voting for him because they dislike Nikki Haley or his opponents. Look how that contrasts with Haley supporters. The plurality of Haley supporters, 39%, are voting for her because they dislike Donald Trump. They dislike her opponent. 33% say they strongly favor her. That's why they're voting for her. 27% say they're voting for her with some reservations. And then in terms of how you're going to feel, depending on who wins the nomination. Well, here, Trump voters feeling if Haley wins the nomination, 75% of them are going to be dissatisfied if Haley ends up winning the nomination. That gets even larger for Haley supporters if Trump wins the nomination. 88% of Haley supporters say they will feel dissatisfied if Trump wins the nomination. That's what Donald Trump will have to work on to bring these folks in the fold if indeed he does emerge with the nomination, Jake.
All right, David Chalian, thanks so much. Let's go to Anderson Cooper in New York. Anderson?
Yeah, Jake, these numbers are fascinating, a lot to unpack. David Axelrod, what stands out to you?
Well, look, Nikki Haley has been pointing to this New Hampshire primary as the place where she was going to break through. And part of it was because of the possibility of all these independent voters who could come into the Republican primary. The fact that they're talking about nearly a 50-50 split between Republicans and independents, I think is a hopeful sign for her. And she has to do it here, because if she doesn't do it here, the donors who are supporting her are going to lose heart. And that's what ends campaigns. That's why DeSantis left. This is a make or break moment for her.
Well, listen, this just reminds us New Hampshire is not Iowa. It's a very different electorate. It's much more similar to a general election. You've got a Republican governor, for example, who's pro-choice, much more favorable for somebody for Republicans or independents who want to stop Trump. If these exit polls even moderately hold, it could be a better than expected night for Nikki Haley. But I think the reality is this: she's got to come within single digits of Donald Trump to really justify staying in the race. She saw a donor bump after DeSantis got out. She is on the airwaves in South Carolina. They're saying she's going to be there doing events, but she's got to show she's within fighting distance to keep this primary alive, and we'll find out soon.
I think these enthusiasm numbers are really interesting too, because they actually point to problems that Donald Trump will have in a general election. I mean, you have 77% of people voting for him saying they're voting for him, in favor of him. But you have essentially the rest of the Republican electorate in a more moderate state where independents vote, saying that they're voting against him. And so I think what this actually shows you, and I think what should be a sign of hope for Nikki Haley, if she can stay within striking distance, she can make a case. Hey, look ahead to Super Tuesday. Look to these states where the electorate looks a little more moderate, looks a little more independent. And there is a lot of hesitancy about Donald Trump.
Look, the number that matters is what Nikki Haley does among Republicans, because it'll be Republicans, not non-Republicans, not unaffiliated, behavioral liberals coming into a Republican primary to decide.
Electorate that looks looks less like Iowa.
There is not another state on the map where the electorate is going to look like this. So I agree with Axe. This is where she had to do something. It looks like maybe, if these exits are true, she did. But ultimately, to win the Republican nomination for president, you have to be liked and voted for by actual Republicans. And if you look at these exits, Trump has his Republican voters. She has people who are soft Republicans or non-Republicans. That is not going to be the case moving forward. Now, it does portend some issues for him in the fall. I mean, you got these independent voters who obviously don't care for him and don't want him to be around anymore. But if you're worried about enthusiasm for a candidate, not for nothing, but the president of the United States got massive enthusiasm problems going on in his own base, which I would say far exceed what Trump's got going on in his.
I know your focus is Republicans. I'm glad that it is. I think that the big picture of New Hampshire is it does sort of symbolize the conversation around swing voters, but specifically suburban voters, where Trump has lost ground, as John mentioned, the 2018, the midterms. This is where there started to be a softening for him. And this is his
I think one of the final hurdles to saying, look, this is my party. It's all populist all the time, no matter where you live, no matter who you are. This limited government stuff is over. This stuff about foreign affairs and policy, it's over. This is the electorate, I think, that should there be a very tight race, et cetera, it will really, I think, put a feather in his cap on saying, this is mine.
Van, do you think Haley needs to come in within single digits or win tonight?
Single digits or win. What I see based on the early exit, the antibodies are trying to kick in. Like, people are coming out. They're saying, please no. People saying, please stop Trump somehow. So you're seeing the antibodies kicking in. For me, it's not just Nikki Haley that's on the line tonight. There were 3 theories about how you stop Trump. One was attack him frontally, punch the bully in the mouth. Chris Christie did that, broke his hand. That was not the answer. Second theory, out Trump Trump. Be more Trump than Trump, but be younger or be different. DeSantis tried that. Vivek Ramaswamy tried that. Buried alive in Iowa. There's only one theory left. Get him one-on-one with a normal Republican and see if you can knock this guy out. If she can't do that in New Hampshire, this thing is over.
I mean, what seems pretty clear from these numbers is that there are people who, and this was their theory, there are independents and Democratic leading independents who migrated over to this primary because they wanted to make a statement about Trump. And that is not a replicable model. She's going to have to start doing well among Republicans. After these first 4 contests, by the way, these races become winner take all. So it's not like, it's not like you can get 45% and 45% your way to the nomination.
But these exit polls spell disaster for Donald Trump in a general election, even against a historically unpopular Joe Biden.
We're closing in on the end of voting in most of New Hampshire. The first significant round of results coming up. Our cameras and correspondents are in position to bring you every moment, including the big reveal of the winner. It's New Hampshire's choice, and there's much more ahead.
I come from MAGA world. I was a MAGA base cult member, baby. I was part of that world, and I left that world, and now, am an opponent of Trump's. Most of the Never Trumpers were never part of that MAGA cult. I was. True. I voted for Trump in 2016 because the same people who voted for him voted for me. I felt like Trump did. The system's fucking broken. Burn it down. Both parties suck. I wanted, Adam, maybe you did too, I wanted disruption in our political system. I think disruption's good. Yeah. Turns out Trump is an evil disruptor. And I did not pay enough attention to that. Once he got elected, I started paying attention to him. And even though Helsinki was my final straw, a month into his presidency, I came home from doing my radio show, sat down at dinner with my wife. I looked at her and I said, this isn't going to end well for us.
I believe if we quantum leap like 10 years forward, which is a great show, by the way, but if we do that and we look back and we say, okay, what do you believe about January 6th? Like in 10 years, nobody's going to believe any of the garbage about the lies. They're going to believe the truth. But right now, that tribal tattoo is it was an inside job or whatever. So let's not get discouraged about that. Let's understand that that's what's driving this and know that the number one goal, the only way to overcome this is not with more facts, though we need to keep getting facts out there. I don't mean to denigrate that. It's with defeating the insurrectionists in November. And that means people like Adam Epstein and I have to belong to a party that maybe we don't always belong to because we have to defeat the insurrectionists.
Absolutely.
Lives of Martha Stewart.
Right now, New Hampshire voters have extraordinary power to shape the fight for the Republican presidential nomination. Most polling places across the Granite State are scheduled to close in just a matter of minutes on this very important primary night. Let's check in at some key polling places. Sarah Seidner is in Concord, New Hampshire, the capital. Sarah, your location is set to close soon. What's going on there?
We're exactly 14 minutes and they are serious about all of the rules here. I want to show you what's going on. So if you look to my left, you will see a big black box. That is the ballot box. So when people get done with their vote, they come and put their votes in that, and then they leave. There have been 1,855 ballots counted so far. And to give you some idea of where that is, it's about 56 to 60% of the total number of voters in this ward, which we are hearing is a very, very high voting area. So we're about 60% of the folks who are registered to vote. If you look behind me, you can see where people are voting just there. You see those stripes with the red, white, and blue. People go in there, they pick their choice, and that is where they vote. And then they sign in here. But here's a fun thing. Right over there, we've been seeing people slowly coming in, and that is where new voters register to vote, and then they go over and vote. Now, here's what happens once they do that. The whole place goes wild. You know why? Because they pick this bell up after they're registered, and they go to vote for the very first time, and this is what you hear. More cowbell, Jake. That's what you hear at Ward 10 in Concord, New Hampshire, when a new voter votes for the very first time.
Very nice. I've got a fever, and the only answer, the only prescription is more cowbell. Sarah Seidner, thanks so much. Let's go back to Kate Baldwin now.
Always.
She's still at that polling place in Nashua. Kate, give us an update on your location and how many undeclared or independent voters are turning out.
Absolutely. Well, I may not be able to top a cowbell. I can top you with new vote totals, with what the voters are saying here tonight. So we just got the latest vote count, the latest tabulation there. The latest we have here in Nashua's Ward 3 is 2,138 votes have been cast. For context, there are just under 5,000 registered voters in Nashua's Ward 3 after they cast their ballot. One of the big options and important options that folks in Ward 3 take a lot of pride in is undeclared voters re-registration, becoming, as I have coined it, probably in a non-scientific way, re-undeclaring. And this is where they come right to this table where they can once again become an undeclared voter. And the latest, and it's actually been updated since we got our latest count, 636 people stopped by this table to undeclare once again, which is about 13% of all registered voters, about 30% of the vote count that we have here. Come outside because we're going to follow the rules somewhat if we must. Because this is where one of these undeclared voters who undeclared once again is Kevin Kelly. It's great to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Who did you vote for this evening?
Nikki Haley.
And why did you vote for Nikki Haley?
It's a vote against Trump. I think it would be better to have her against Biden in the elections than it would be Trump and her.
Do you consider yourself generally independent, Republican, or Democrat?
Democrat.
So when you undeclared, you voted for Nikki Haley. If it was Nikki Haley against Joe Biden in a general election, who are you voting for?
Joe Biden.
What is the issue you care most about this election?
That's a good question. I guess the economy. I don't think that Trump would have done a good job with the economy as Biden would have.
Kevin Kelly, it's great to meet you. Thank you for sticking around in this chilly evening. Really appreciate it. One of the many undeclared voters voted tonight and went back to that table to re-undeclare so they can have that, they can maintain that status next time around. Guys.
All right, Kate Baldwin, thanks so much. Let's go to Dana Bash now in Manchester, New Hampshire. And Dana, you have a panel there to talk about that. But that voter right there, that's exactly what Republicans warn against, but it is also just one of the things that happens in New Hampshire's crazy primary. We've seen it happen before with Democrats crossing over to vote for Republicans and Republicans crossing over to vote for Democrats.
Absolutely, Jake. It's what makes what happens here on any given election in the presidential season really anyone's guess, despite everything that is predicted ahead of time. Chris Wallace, we were watching Kate with Kevin Kelly and saying kind of what Jake was alluding to there, that there are so many of these undeclared voters that are so unique to New Hampshire, and they are deliberate and they are strategic in many ways.
Oh, absolutely. And they could swing an election. And
if our exit polls turn out to be correct, 47% of the Republican people who voted in the Republican primary being undeclared independent voters would be a record. The record was 45% in the Mitt Romney election in 2012. Having said that, as much as 47% and the undeclared, we assume, are going to go for Haley, it may not be enough because Trump is leading in the latest polls by more among the registered Republicans than Haley was beating Trump among the registered undeclared. In fact, I was talking to a top member of the Trump campaign team this afternoon who said, we would really get worried if 55% of the electorate were undeclared. In the high 40s, they would have been surprised. They thought maybe the low 40s, but even at 47%, I don't think they believe that's going to be enough to put Nikki Haley either over the top or especially close.
I mean, Dana, my favorite thing about these nights is, and we're already on kind of the emotional roller coaster of when the polls close, we start to get this information. When I got off that overnight flight we were on from Des Moines and we landed here in Manchester, after that Iowa caucus, everyone here was so down on Nikki Haley's chances. They were like, there's no way she's going to pull out here in New Hampshire. And that was how it felt up until, I would say, midday today, when I started hearing from, people I've talked to since the Mitt Romney primary in 2012 who really have the state wired. And they're starting to say they're looking at these exit polling numbers and they're saying, you know what, maybe Nikki Haley has there's more here than we thought. Now, they may be, on the backside of this emotional roller coaster here in a couple of hours. But I will say, kind of as we're sitting here tonight, that suspense is very, very real. People really are wondering if Nikki Haley's going to surprise tonight.
And it is all because of those undeclared voters. But as I've been spending a week here in the last several months, really, undeclared voters is not simply independent who may, be so inclined to vote for Haley. It spans the gamut from Bernie Sanders supporters to Donald Trump supporters who simply don't like the Republican Party necessarily or want to be aligned with it. So when we talk about undeclared voters, Trump is going to get a sliver of them. The question is how many?
Yeah.
So they want to keep that. The Haley team wants to keep that very low. The Trump team, of course, is thinking at least a quarter of them or so. So as I've talked to voters for the last several days here, at least, Haley has shown promise here for months. They've known that this is the place for her. I met one yesterday, Carol Booth, a teacher who left work to go meet Nikki Haley at a brewery. And she said the reason she's supporting her, because she can serve 8 years in office. So that generational change argument.
Yeah.
But look at what's happened here over the last 8 days. You mentioned Iowa. We were all on that plane together. 8 days, DeSantis is out of the race. It's down to 2 people. I don't think that we would have thought that necessarily.
Can I just say one thing about this, though? Trump was saying, yeah, but you could have Democrats who come in and vote in this, and they can't.
You cannot.
Because you have to have deregistered as a Democrat and registered as an
That's
undeclared by October 6th. And fewer than 4,000 people did that. So these are genuine independents that we're talking about here, are the undeclared. They're not Democratic voters who decided to come in and mess up the Republican primary.
Which is such a key part of the DNA of New Hampshire. To be independent, to the live free or die state, and to genuinely kind of switch over. I mean, how many voters have you all talked to here who have said, I have voted for Democrats, I have voted for Republicans, without thinking twice about it, because it's just what they have done. And to your point about the fact that these independent undeclared voters, the hope in the Nikki Haley camp is that the majority go to her. It is true because Donald Trump now is establishment because he was president. He still has the appeal to people who don't like politics, don't register as a party, and come in and vote as undeclared independent voters and do it just because Donald Trump is on the ballot.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's a mistake to think of this block of undeclareds as centrist, right? Like that is kind of perhaps our instinct, but that's not necessarily the case for all of the reasons that you laid out. And, I think one of the most fascinating things about some of what we're going to learn here, and I think you're going to see the Haley campaign and her supporters try to capitalize on this. If in fact she has a better showing here tonight than she otherwise might, it strengthens her argument with Republicans that she is capable of winning in a general election. And they have not really, one of the major things we haven't seen in this race throughout the entire arc of it, there has been no one that has been able to stand up and credibly say, I could beat Donald Trump in the nominating contest and do better against Biden. This electorate is one that is much closer. The dynamics that shape it are some of the same dynamics that are going to shape, the electorates in Arizona and Georgia and the states that are going to decide the election.
That's her whole argument
right?
here.
So it's if she can come out of here and be able to make that argument more strongly to donors who are, would be willing to fund or not her continued campaign, and then whether or not, Republican voters buy it. I mean, that's really the only path I see for her at this point.
And at a rally in Rochester last Wednesday, I'm thinking this exact point. Two friends came. One who thought that Nikki Haley was too conservative. One thought that she's too liberal, but they both were voting for her because she could restore the Republican Party. So we heard that again and again and again. It is an uphill battle, even if she wins in this state. And that's a tall order at this point. But for now, at least, this is definitely much more of a race than it might have seemed with that Iowa 32%. But it's all about the margin tonight, and we'll find that out.
But just remember, even if she does well tonight, and I'm not being a naysayer about Nikki Haley, her next shot is South Carolina in a month. And right now in the polls, she's down by about 40 points to Donald Trump. I mean, one of the things we're talking about here is independents coming into a Republican primary and having their say, and that's legal and allowed and all of that. On the other hand, it is the Republican nomination, and it's really hard to win the Republican nomination if registered Republican voters are overwhelmingly for your opponent. And for her to stay in this race till late February, which is when the South Carolina primary is, and she trails by a lot, and it's a tall order.
That's the whole argument that the Trump campaign makes over and over again, and you hear the former president saying it on a loop, which is that she is appealing too much in this Republican contest to independents. He calls them rhinos, but to people who are not tried and true conservatives. In this memo that the Haley campaign released today, which is, sort of a messaging strategy memo from her campaign manager, she makes the argument that South Carolina has more of a similar electorate to New Hampshire than people realize. We have to sort of say, okay, pump the brakes on that a little bit. Yes, people who are not registered Democrats can vote. Registered Republicans can vote, but Democrats who vote in the primary that's earlier, I think it's just a couple of weeks.
A week from Saturday.
They can't do it. And the percentage of independent voters there is nowhere near what it is here.
Nowhere near.
It's not. And I mean, my question for South Carolina for her is, what has happened to the country club Republicans that live down in and around Charleston? Have they left the party? Are they actually going to come out for her? Are they willing to go against Trump? I mean, the electorate down there is so for the former president. It's just pretty overwhelming.
But bringing it back to New Hampshire, it all matters the margin here. This could be an academic discussion, or it could not be. But look, I think any polls now are essentially outdated. So what happens tonight? This race potentially starts new, or it doesn't.
Yeah. All right. Great discussion. Jake, I'm going to toss it back to you.
It's the top of the hour, and it's a high-stakes night in New Hampshire as voting winds down in the Republican presidential primary. Most polling places are closing right now, and we could get results at any moment. I'm Jake Tapper in the CNN Election Center with our special live coverage. We're getting closer to a critical moment, our first chance to potentially project the winner. That could happen about an hour from now, after all voting ends across the granite state. The fight for the Republican presidential nomination is now down to just two major candidates, Donald Trump and Nikki Haley. Trump is hoping, of course, to follow up his Iowa landslide with another overwhelming victory with the goal of knocking Haley out of the race. This is a make or break moment for Governor Nikki Haley. She's been counting on New Hampshire as her best shot at slowing Trump's march to the nomination and getting some much needed momentum. And this all hinges on the outcome of tonight's primary once the very last votes are cast and counted. Let's go to John Berman now. He's at that polling place in New Hampshire, Manchester. John, with voting ending, what's going on there now?
All right. It's very interesting what's happening right now. They have shut the doors here in Manchester Ward 6. But before the doors shut, a couple voters walked in here and they're actually registering to vote, which you can do on primary day. Now, what has to happen now is once they're registered, they will vote. They will walk down. They will pick up their ballots. I'll show you where that will happen down here. They will cast those ballots. And once these two final voters cast those final ballots, we will get a readout of the election results here in Manchester Ward 6. I'm trying to gauge just how long it will take. I can tell you the election workers here, they were eager to get this count started because there are so many write-in ballots, but they have to wait. By law, they've got to wait. If you were on the gym floor by 7 o'clock, they've got to wait for you to get through the process. And right now they are filling out the paperwork down there. Let me bring you up to speed of how we got here. Once they show up, they get to choose which primary they want to vote in. If they want to vote in the Republican primary, they grab one of these things right here. If they want to vote in the Democratic primary, sorry about that, they grab a blue slip right here. Republicans obviously vote in the Republican primary, Democrats in the Democratic primary. Undeclared voters can choose which primary they vote in. Once they pick up those slips, they go to those booths right there. They fill out their ballot, and then it goes to the machine. I'm going to point right down the camera right here one more time so you can see they are still filling out the paperwork to register. So it could take a few minutes before they cast that ballot now, that final ballot in Manchester Ward 6, and it is fed into the machine and counted. A few minutes ago, as of a few minutes ago, there had been 2,800 votes cast here. The record is 3,700. But what is unclear is how many Democratic votes are. About 2,100 would be a Republican record. So we'll try to figure out how many votes were cast in the Democratic primary, including those write-ins for Joe Biden. Jake, I will shout the minute that these two voters cast their ballots there, and we will get a full readout from Manchester Ward 6, which could be a good barometer of where things are headed tonight. Jake?
All right, John Berman in Manchester, New Hampshire. Thanks so much. I'm with John King here at the Magic Well. Give us an overview of Manchester.
I was looking forward to letting voters see my really bad scribble for the first time, but we'll bring it back if we get there. Look, Manchester is the largest city in the state of New Hampshire. There are no giant cities in the state of New Hampshire, but if you've ever been through, it's right along the river. Former big mill town, more diverse now. A lot of those mill jobs are gone. But this is your blue-collar, gritty center of Manchester. It is very important to Donald Trump because there's a lot of blue-collar Republicans there. He has remade the Republican Party in many ways. It was critical back in 2008. Again, Obama had an early lead in New Hampshire. Hillary Clinton turned out voters here to the last second. That's why it was interesting, kind of amused to see people showing up at the last second because that's, this is why you wait and watch this play out. So let's go back to 2016 and let's look at Manchester. In the Republican primary, Donald Trump got 37% of the vote, if you round that up. The difference, and this is going to make tonight interesting. Remember, most of his rivals dropped out. Now, DeSantis, Christie, Ramaswamy, DeSantis and Christie definitely. I believe Ramaswamy also still on the ballot, right? So people can still vote for them. But back in New Hampshire then, you had Kasich, you had Jeb Bush, you had Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, you had Christie, you had Carly Fiorina, you had Ben Carson, you had Rand Paul was still on the ballot, Rick Santorum and Mike Huckabee still on the ballot, the former Virginia governor, Jim Gilmore. So you had a lot more candidates then, and yet Donald Trump won the state with 35%, and he won the city of Manchester. That's Concord, excuse me. Let me drop on down. That's the capital. But Donald Trump won that as well, and he won the city of Manchester at 37%. This is why what John says, the early bellwether, right? We're going to count. We're going to go on for a while. Sometimes the count in New Hampshire, by the way, goes slow, not because anything nefarious is afoot. It just takes time, especially when you have all those write-in ballots because Joe Biden's a write-in campaign. But just want to remind people, yes, this is Nikki Haley's best shot. Some people think the last best shot to prove she can beat Donald Trump somewhere.
I'm going to interrupt.
It was a good state for him.
John, I'm going to interrupt you right now. Sarah Seidner is in Concord, the capital right now. Sarah, tell us what's going on where you are.
So what you're seeing the moderator there, Jay Whitelaw. She is an attorney. She is very serious about her job, but she is also having a good time. It is 7:05, so polls have closed here, and she is getting tape. You'll see that ballot box, and you hear that, sounds like ticker tape. You hear that tape sort of coming through the ballot box there. And as it comes through, and when she pulls that, it will give her the numbers. She will then make a phone call to the Secretary of State. There are 3 different tapes that come out of that box that gives her the numbers of the people who voted and who they voted for. And then she will give that information to the Secretary of State and to the city as well, and then keep one, and it will be checked several times to make sure everything has been done properly. So far, there are more than 1,855 people who have voted. That includes absentee ballots as well. And so you will see this process happening now. Eventually, she will go over, she will pick up the phone, they will have the conversation with the Secretary of State, and then she will announce who won, basically, who got what votes to the folks in here. But the polls have closed. There is no one that I see left in line. Everyone has been able to vote. And so as you're seeing here, this is like the last bit of what happens here in Concord. This is Ward 10, a very high voting district. According to all of the folks here, people are very, very, very much into making sure that democracy works and that they're taking part in it. She is now going to call up the city and call up the Secretary of State. We may hear this phone call a little bit as she is making that call. Let's listen in. Okay,
Hi, this is Jay from Ward 10 with results.
If you can hear, that's just said, I'm calling you. My name is Jay Whitelaw. I'm calling with the results.
Okay, what would you like first? Okay, you don't want the totals, right? You just want me the Republican? Okay, undervotes 2, you care. Okay, Mary Max, oh, okay. Donald Jorns, 0. Mary Maxwell, 3. Glenn McPeters, 0. S. Peterson Merrill, 0. Darius L. Mitchell, 0. Mike Pence, 4. Vivek Ramaswamy, 6. Tim Scott, 0. Hirsch Singh, 0. Samuel Howard Sloan, 0. David Stuckenberg, 0. Rachel Swift, 0. Donald Trump, 467. Scott Allen Ayers, 0. Ryan Binkley, 1. Doug Burgum, 1. Robert Carney Jr., 0. John Anthony Castro, 0. Chris Christie, 6. Ron DeSantis, 9. Nikki Haley, 739. Hutchinson, 0. Peter Buttigieg, 0. Gary Johnson, 0. Write-ins, 3.
Yeah, we have some votes here from Concord, New Hampshire, Ward 10. A strong showing in this one ward for Nikki Haley.
739 votes for Nikki Haley, 467 votes for Donald Trump. Interesting. It's pretty easy to get on the ballot in New Hampshire. So you heard a lot of names you've never heard of before.
So I gather.
People do that every 4 years and they get on the ballot. But also interesting, one of the challenges for her, especially if she says she finally got the 2-person race that she wanted, was to pick up all the other anti-Trump votes. And I know it's only a few votes, but you heard a few votes for Pence. You heard a few votes for Christie. You heard a couple of votes for Ramaswamy. Trump will be disappointed he didn't get those. Go ahead.
Let's go to John Berman, who's in Manchester, New Hampshire right now. John, what's going on where you are?
All right, you're looking at Louise Goslin right now, who's the moderator here in Ward 6 in Manchester, and she's going to print out the tape. She's going to print out the tape from this machine, and she's going to read us the results from this tape in Manchester, Ward 6. The last vote has been cast, and what you're seeing her do is get the preliminary numbers from it. Now, one of the things I've been told, obviously, is they won't have the results from the write-in ballots themselves, but they will know how many write-in ballots have been cast. As you're listening to her speak and read out the numbers, remember, Donald Trump won by about 20% here in the 2016 Republican primary. So that's a little bit of a gauge of how he's doing here. One other thing, the record Republican turnout here, as we're watching her go through this, was about 2,060. So more than that would be a record Republican turnout here. We'll try to get a sense of what that is. This is the tape. When it's done printing out, she'll read the names out loud for us, and we'll hear what it is.
Your vote machine as if you want to print another copy. Slide the machine out and turn the machine on.
Yeah, and then we turn it back on, right?
Turn your back on it, yeah. And then we'll start asking questions again.
454 write-ins. 454 write-ins. But it's almost done printing, and Louise is going to read the Republicans first. All right, hang on one second. Here we go. She's got to sign it first, I'm told. I don't want to get in the way of the actual legal process here.
It would be nice if you gave me a pen to write.
I took it off the table.
Oh, there's two down.
We have a little bit of a pen issue in Ward 6 here in Manchester.
Wait a minute. Here.
Mine was writing earlier.
Yeah,
Maybe it's the paper.
This right. I think
I have a felt tip. Is it legal?
It's the underneath it. Yeah. We had it.
All right, Louise has now found a pen. It was the fourth pen that worked. She has signed the short tape here, and we are about to get the results read here in Manchester Ward 6. Again, remember, Donald Trump won by about 20 points here. So if Nikki Haley is within single digits of that, it is a much closer race. All right, I'm told right now that different people have to sign this to verify that it is in fact the tape from the ballot counter here. A lot of signatures with pens that don't work so well. All right, this is the final signature. Second, the penultimate signature, I am now told. Okay, last signature.
John, can you, Nikki? There we go. Print the rest.
All right, here we go.
Okay.
Louise is going to take a look at the tape.
Yes, I did say. When it asks if you want me to slide them Read it straight to Don or Nikki and she'll do it, okay? Yeah. When they activate, she can ask you if you
Okay, right here it's fine?
Okay, go for it.
Okay. We have 0 overvotes and 6 undervotes. Mary Maxwell, 1. Glenn Peters, 0. S. Peterson Merrill, 1. Darius Mitchell, 0. Mike Pence, 2. Vivek Ramaswamy, 3. Tim Scott, 0. Hirsch Ginn, 0. Samuel Howard Sloan, 0. David Stuckenberg, 1. Rachel Swift, 2. Donald J. Trump, 1,169. Scott Ayers, 0. Ryan Binkley, 0. Doug Burgum, 1. Robert Carney, 0. John Anthony Castro, 0. Curtis Christie, 14. Ron DeSantis, 15. Nikki Haley, 849. Asa Hutchinson, 0. Peter Jeddick, 0. Perry Johnson, 1. Donald.
All right, we've gotten the results we
Zero.
wanted there
Write-ins.
from the moderator at Manchester Ward 6. John King, a better showing for Donald Trump in this ward, Ward 6 in Manchester, but still Nikki Haley within spitting distance.
By about 300 votes there, 320 votes if there's the quick math there in Manchester. Again, it's one ward in blue-collar Manchester, but as John Berman noted, it was a ward that was strong for Donald Trump in a much more crowded field. Important to remember that, a much more crowded field 8 years ago in 2016 when he got his first win in New Hampshire, and then it was over. I mean, he had to march on. It took a while, but that was the snowball got started. Now, Manchester, Nikki Haley running, behind Donald Trump. You could say respectable, but still he's ahead.
Still
there.
behind, absolutely.
That's the math he needs to do. And so sorry, I kept turn that off a second. Just come back here. Just want to point out where we were earlier with Sarah Steiner. That's Concord. I'm going to move this out of the way a little bit. Concord, where you had the other math where Nikki Haley was ahead here. This is where she has to do that. Manchester, blue-collar city. Concord, the state capital, the suburbs around it. This would be a more moderate area for Nikki Haley. So you're just watching these two glimpses, two precincts within two key places. Haley starting off in Concord. That's what she needs to do. Is it enough? We have a lot of counting to do tonight. And in Manchester, again, part of Donald Trump's blue-collar base. We always think of Donald Trump's blue-collar base as being mostly rural. In Manchester, remember, he won there in 2016. Worth watching there. Blue-collar workers, it's a very gritty city. People who work with their hands, they like Trump. Is that the right margin? We'll have to see as more precincts come in Manchester. Just to go back, just again, that's here. That's Manchester. I want to move this out of the way so it doesn't distract people a little bit. And I need to get it completely out of the way so I can go back in time. Here we go to 2016, citywide, right? That was one precinct. He got 40% of the vote. The expectation is in a two-person race, he was president of the United States, he was a nominee, he should do much better than that.
Right.
But this was key. Manchester was key. One of the places where, in a lot of places, it was close, right? The margins within the candidates were closer than this. This is one of the places where Donald Trump had a lopsided win over the 8 or 9 other people on the ballot back then. So it will be interesting to watch as we get more results in Manchester, how that holds up. And just one other key quick point about the value of having these great reporters on the ground. You see, Concord's votes, Sarah Seidner was there, right? She gave you that one precinct. It was for Nikki Haley. Here it is here right now, coming in this way. Could be a little bit more than that. But you're getting your first vote. So because we have people on the ground in right places, sometimes you are seeing results, and I'm scribbling them down with my messy handwriting before they actually get fed into the system, because you see the phone calls happening. They call the Secretary of State, and then they go into the official.
Yeah, this is not the Sarah Seidner's numbers. This is official. This is
yeah.
official numbers.
Yeah,
these are actual real votes.
Right. Those are real. Those are official votes coming in. And again, we have some votes. Let's go check over here. In Keene, this is where you're going. Essentially, you know New Hampshire well. You start over the seaport and you're driving west toward Vermont. Essentially, this is along southern New Hampshire. And again, it's 22% of the vote. Keene 2024. It's not a lot of votes. You're going to see a lot of this as we go through these towns. We're going to go through these small towns where you're seeing, 300 votes, 800 votes, a couple thousand votes. That's the nature. You got 260 towns that we're going to be counting, cities and towns we're counting votes in tonight. So some of them's not a lot out of math, but if you're Nikki Haley, anytime you can see any one of these townships filled in with your yellow, you're happy. The question is, we are very early in the count.
Yeah, and as a general measure, she needs to do really well down here and then around Hanover. But
right.
That's basically, but that's basically and north of Conway.
Yes.
But that's basically her area, right?
Yeah, and Donald Trump did very well here in 2016. She needs to take that away from him, essentially. If you look at 2016 to tonight, she needs to take that away.
All right, we're getting deeper into this primary night in New Hampshire soon. We're going to get a critical early read on the Trump-Haley showdown once the last polling places close. We're tracking every vote as they're all cast and counted across the state. We're going to get results from 2 more locations next. Plus, I'm going to talk to the New Hampshire Secretary of State. This is CNN's live coverage of the New Hampshire Republican primary 2024. Stay with us.
There is
here we want to have a rational discussion about what to do about what's going on. We had a horrible atrocity committed against Jews. I think that was a political act. It was designed. I mean, the people who promoted it were absolutely morally. I mean, there's no difference between them and bin Laden. Okay, the United States responded to bin Laden. We know how that played out. Basically, now the United States has lost influence in the world. It is now.
okay.
Why do we want to enable this?
Here's the difference between the United States response to bin Laden is bin Laden is not like camped out on the borders of the United States.
Yes, it doesn't matter whether it was.
Well, no, I think it does matter because then it's like if you don't I don't understand what the alternative is, because otherwise you're basically saying like, why don't the Israelis just lay down and die?
You have to ask the question: who created Hamas? The Netanyahu government obviously preferred and has openly stated that it preferred to essentially support Hamas in order to undermine the Palestinian Authority, which it didn't. So it could essentially promote its policies in the West Bank, which are morally unacceptable. The Qataris were brought in 2018 by the United States with Israel's approval to provide aid to Hamas. Much of it was humanitarian, but other parts of it were military and other provisions. Iran, you have rather credible reports that some hundreds of Hamas fighters that participated in this atrocity were trained in Iran within the last year. How does this happen? Of course, they probably came through the Rafah crossing in Egypt, which means that there must have been multiple parties that understood this was going on. And the vaunted Israeli intelligence presumably has been distracted by all of the domestic conflict within Israel, which essentially, in some ways is very similar to the 1973 attack. Israel is divided internally, and that division has caused vulnerability. So if you add up all these various states and the policies of the Netanyahu government, which have been essentially to preserve itself, Netanyahu has been, the things that he's done are, when it boils down to it, all enabling his own escape from being held accountable by the Israeli public for other actions which compromise the security of the Israeli state. So you have to put Israel's response to Hamas in that context. I think we're giving Hamas too much credit here. I'll leave it at that.
I think one of the interesting moments now in our politics is I think the Democratic Party has a real opportunity to reclaim some of that strong on foreign policy.
Yep.
And if they do, it'll be transformational.
Right.
It's just fascinating. I mean, who is it that gets on a plane and goes to Taiwan? Nancy Pelosi.
I know.
You know, who is it that gets on a plane, flies to Warsaw, takes a 10-hour train, and gets, the first American president in a war zone that we didn't control in history, to stand by the Ukrainian people, a Democratic president, and putting together a coalition that really is saving the Western world.
Poppy and Phil.
It's time to bring you our key race alert. We only have 1% of the vote in, but these are actual votes. Let's check it out. Nikki Haley right now is in the lead with 54.3% of the vote. She has 2,017 votes. She has 333 votes ahead of Donald Trump, who has 45.3% of the vote. Remember, this is just 1% of the vote in. We still have 99 more percentage points to come in. But as of this second, with actual votes coming in, Nikki Haley has the lead, 54-45. Let's go to Boris Sanchez right now. He's in Belmont, New Hampshire, at that polling place where voting has ended. Boris, tell us more about what's happening.
Jake, so the vote tally has been completed for the Republican primary. And with us, we have Alvin Nix. He's the moderator of this location, the town of Belmont. What are the results?
I'd like to welcome you all to the town of Belmont, January 23rd, 2024 presidential primary, based on guidance provided to me and moderators of the state to announce the Republican results while the Democrat results are still being tabulated. Based on the results of today's vote in the town of Belmont, New Hampshire, we have the following. Hirsch v. Singh, 0 votes. Samuel Howard Sloan, 1 vote. David Stuckenberg, 0 votes. Rachel Swift, 0 votes. Donald J. Trump, 1,244 votes. Scott Allen Ayers, 0 votes. Ryan L. Binkley, 3 votes. Doug Burgum, 2 votes. Robert S. Carney Jr., 0 votes. John Anthony Castro, 0 votes. Chris Christie, 2 votes. Ron DeSantis, 12 votes. Nikki Haley, 640 votes. Asa Hutchinson, 1 vote. Peter Jeddick, 0 votes. Perry Johnson, 0 votes. Donald Kjorns, 0 votes. Mary Maxwell, 1 vote. Glenn J. McPeters, 0 votes. S. Peterson Merrill, 0 votes.
About Rachel Swift
Darius
versus Samuel
L.
Howard
Mitchell,
Sloan.
0 votes.
I think we got the numbers we need, which are Nikki Haley, about half the number of votes that Donald Trump got in this one ward in Belmont, the township of Belmont.
Belmont. So it's almost 2-1 for Donald Trump. So the question is, what does that mean, right? So let's just go back in time and take a look at 2016. Trump got 40% of the vote. Again, a much crowded field. So you're going to see this a lot tonight where the numbers are off. He won with 40% with 654 votes. There's a lot of candidates down here. We don't need to go through all the names again, but everyone remembers the crowded field back then. So you come back now and you look at Belmont again. Let me come back to 2024 so we don't confuse people. Belmont is right here. And Belmont comes up. It's a small town. And so you have these numbers. And so the question is if you're Trump, in the places that you won last time, you want to keep winning them. You want to win every township you can. The question just is, can he keep doing this up here? If you go back to the map, and again, we're going to get more votes. We're going to get more towns. They trickle in slowly at first in New Hampshire, but then they come in. You see them starting to pull in here. So you see right above Belmont, we already have some results that are made into the computer. That's from Laconia. I put that just the right place, didn't I? So again, it's only 9%. So we have a way to count here. 15th large population center of the 260 towns. So there's a lot of votes here. Trump with an early lead. That's what you want. We have a long way to go in the count. I just want to remind people as we go back, this is Nikki Haley's best chance because of moderates voting, undeclared voting. This was a very pro-Trump state by smaller margins, obviously, before. So she is trying to beat him with a more moderate, open to undeclared voters electorate in a place that launched him in 2016.
All right, let's bring in New Hampshire Secretary of State David Scanlon, who is in the capital of Concord. Mr. Secretary, thanks so much for joining. So before today, you'd predicted a record turnout of more than 320,000 voters. Did your prediction come true? How's turnout today?
Well, it certainly appears that there was a really strong vote in New Hampshire in the Republican primary. It became clear towards the late afternoon when some towns were asking for more ballots. They were getting concerned that the Republican ballots were getting low. So we do have an inventory of extra ballots that we were able to ship to about a dozen towns in New Hampshire. But based on that, I think my number is in line, and it's possible that it will get exceeded.
Any reports of any serious irregularities or any problems at any of the polling sites?
No, it was a very smooth election today. And obviously there are minor problems in every election. Those were dealt with quickly. And this was a very smooth election. And hopefully the results will come in equally smooth.
What's being done to make sure the ballots are secured and counted accurately? What's the process there?
In New Hampshire, counting the ballots is a continuous process in the open. So anybody that's interested can observe a polling place. That observation begins when the polls open, and it ends at the end of the night after all of the ballots have been counted and the results posted at the polling place and announced by the moderator. And then those vote totals will be sent to the Secretary of State, my office tomorrow morning very early, and take those numbers and aggregate them so that we can come up with the official statewide totals.
All right, Secretary of State Scanlon, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it. There's only about a half hour left until all voting ends in New Hampshire. Remember, some of the townships allow voting later than others. That will be our first chance to potentially project a winner of the New Hampshire Republican primary. More votes are being counted. More votes are being reported. We're going to bring you all the updated numbers after this quick break.
I always grew up with a Democratic Party that was more the party of government. And now we're at this place where the Republican Party is every bit as much of a big government party. But the Republican Party, more dangerously, is further down the road of authoritarianism. Doing what I did 5 or 6 years ago, leaving Trump, leaving the Republican Party, I lost virtually all of my supporters and followers and friends.
Right.
And one of the primary dividing points was, and they would tell me this every day, they still do, like, I want certain policies, but I don't want a king or a dictator to have the power to give me that. Adam, I get so many of these folks who tell me directly, Joe, I don't care if Trump's a king, comma, as long as he gives us what we need and what I want. That's a hard red line. No, but it's an authoritarian party now, clearly.
When it comes to the faith side of things, I still hold my faith very dear. And the reason is, like, look, I think my faith has been so perverted, by the way. Like, Donald Trump has been turned into the new Jesus Christ. He's the new, like, moral stick everybody measures up against. And And, you know, my belief is like, look, you have to treat like the Jesus of the Bible I grew up reading actually treated the poor very compassionately. He had compassion for immigrants. He actually, you know, wasn't obsessed with politics. This is, by the way, a fairly new journey of my life, is recognizing that you can be a Christian in politics, or you can be a religious person in politics, but you don't bring your religion to politics. I've always known that part. Like I was a man of faith in a secular position, so I have to act like that. But this has been so perverted and turned into Christian nationalism. And what I saw, I can look back at 1992 and see, I went to the Christian Coalition meeting, which was basically you had in essence, a failure of the moral majority, which was Falwell's group. And then the Christian Coalition was Pat Robertson's answer to that. And this was the first time that George H.W. Bush came and actually spoke to the group. And it was the first time that you really saw mainstream Republican politics openly court evangelicals. Now, look, even at the thing, he said, like, we don't want to go back to like the days of Ozzie and Harriet. So he held true to what he really believed. But that was an open signal to the Christian right that we need you, you're part of this movement. And that's fine until the Christian right made a decision to take over the party. And that's what's happened over the last, frankly, 15 years. And I can look back and see the different iterations of that. But now we're in a moment where, like, my goodness, the GOP doesn't represent the GOP that you and I remember. It doesn't represent the party of fiscal discipline. It's the party of let's make somehow Christianity the national religion, but it's not a true Christianity.
And I got another key race alert for you. There's only 5% of the vote in, but right now Donald Trump has taken a slight lead. He has 51.1% of the vote. He's 473 votes ahead of Nikki Haley, who has 48% of the vote. Again, it's only 5% of the vote, but right now at this hour, it's neck and neck. Our exit polls are offering some clues about how the rest of the night might play out. Let's go back to David Chalian with that. And David, you're getting more on the ways that Republican primary voters don't see eye to eye?
Yes, that's right, Jake. In these exit poll results, you see a Mars and Venus universe for Haley and Trump coalitions here. Take a look at the numbers. Among Trump voters, 70% of them, according to our exit polls, are registered Republicans. Donald Trump, his support, 27% of his voters are registered undeclared or independents. 3% were unregistered before today. Look at how that compares with Nikki Haley. It's a complete reversal. It's an alternate universe. Among Haley voters, 70% are registered undeclared. Only 27% are registered Republicans. We also see this with when asking people, did Joe Biden legitimately win the 2020 election? Which he did. Among Trump voters, 80% say no. They say it wrongly. No, Joe Biden did not legitimately win the 2020 election. Haley voters, it's the complete opposite. 83% of Haley voters say correctly that Joe Biden was the legitimate winner in 2020. Only 15% of her voters say wrongly that he was not. This is the Trump, Haley, Mars, Venus election tonight in New Hampshire.
All right, David, thank you so much. Interesting stuff. Anderson, quite a thing to behold, all those people who believe something that is not true.
That is true. Scott Jennings, actually, Scott, you made the point earlier that the president or Donald Trump would be elected by or anybody, whoever the nominee is, they need Republican support.
Yeah,
they're going to be elected by Republicans.
Yes, and this tells the tale. Trump's winning 70% of registered Republicans, which is interesting because a lot of folks thought this particular Republican Party is more moderate. Well, the last 5 national surveys that have been released on this race have all had Trump at or slightly above 70%. So if these exits hold and he gets 70% of the Republicans who are registered Republicans in New Hampshire, but he's going to hit the number that he's hitting among the party at large. I say all this, and I've done a complicated algorithm to tell you Republicans support Donald Trump, even if the unregistered unregistered voters
What's
don't.
the margin of error on that?
Zero.
We were out of crayons, so
The Republican Party, and look, this may be they may be walking into a huge folly here, but the Republican Party wants to rerun this thing because they believe they are on the cusp of euphoric vindication. They may be wrong, but that's what we're seeing among the actual party members.
But Scott, I hear you. I see you. You are not wrong that Donald Trump is by and far away the dominant force in Republican politics. That is a fact. But even in Iowa, nearly half of the people voted for someone other than Donald Trump. Now tonight, this is independents, and this can be Republican independents who lean Republican. People you need in a general election are skewing so strongly to Nikki Haley. If you're looking in the vacuum of the primary, I think we know the direction this very likely could go, which is Donald Trump is favored to win. But these are horrifying numbers for him in a general election, which is Nikki Haley's best selling point and what she needs to tell donors to stay alive and to stay in this race.
I feel like
Exactly.
I'm in family therapy, actually, for the party. And this does pretty much sum it up, right? Like those folks that are like, it's over, this is his. And the people who are like, there's a fighting chance. There's some of us who are going to magically show up and say, no, we want to be the Republicans we were in 2002. I don't know if that's the case, but certainly this is the kind of moment where people are sending a message one way or another. They are making the call.
Yes, and I looked at Scott's really complicated algorithm and I created one of my own, Trump week in the general election. That's what these numbers show us. And there are numbers here that that indicate, I mean, look, you've got 50% of, or 47% of voters today who say that Trump wouldn't be fit to be president if he were convicted of a crime. So your 70% of Republicans who are embracing him wholeheartedly are putting somebody forward who
I'm
has
blown
massive
away by
general
all
election.
you mathematicians with your complicated. But the fact is that among Republicans, and this is one of the reasons why Trump has advanced, I think the notion that he can't win has receded over time. And so among that 70% on Scott's complicated algorithm there, they're convinced that Trump can win. And that's one of the things that's happened in this race. Like, I do think that these are cautionary numbers for him. And we don't know what's going to happen during the course of these next 10 months. He may be convicted over the course of these next 10 months. And there's clearly a body of voters who are supporting him now who may not be.
You have a point. Totally agree. There is a cohort of Republicans. My guess is they skew older. They remember the before times. And they don't want to vote for a convicted felon for president. They don't want the president to be a
They're
convicted
old-fashioned
felon.
in that way.
And so, yes. And so if you're Trump, he's never gotten more votes than a Democrat. And a few of those folks peel off. It is a huge problem if he's convicted and not pushed or acquitted.
That's a whole different story.
Yeah, but I do think that what David's pointing to is important. Part of what we're looking at as Trump's strength, his resilience, is really a reflection of Biden's fragility. Republicans are not afraid of Joe Biden. They're not afraid. They don't think that by putting up somebody this damaged, frankly, this deranged, with this many deficits, is going to hurt them at all. Because the polls show over and over again that even with 978 felonies, he's still neck and neck with Biden. And so it's a worrying sign. You're correct. There's some worrying signs for Trump. There should be worrying signs for Democrats that they're not afraid. They're not afraid of.
I think
Go ahead.
But there are also so many unknowns, right? I mean, so there's this question of Trump going through the legal process, and if he's convicted, I think there are concerns about timeline. And but there's also, we've seen over the last couple of months, the economic indicators are getting better. Consumer confidence is going up. Inflation's coming down. I mean, to put forward a nominee with the kind of vulnerabilities that Trump has in a world where things can change dramatically, people are going to, maybe feeling better about how their pocketbook is come October, November.
This is why I do think that this is a kind of a mix. If Trump wins tonight, and if he ultimately prevails, whether Haley goes on or not, I think that he's going to enter a different world. We talk Mars and Venus, but he's entering the whole galaxy when he gets out of these races. And it's not as friendly as these Republican primaries. Right now, he looks like a world beater because he's operating within his own universe. But that's not going to be the case when he gets to the general election.
Let's go back to Washington with Jake and John. Jake.
All right, thanks so much, Anderson. John King, we're getting a few more votes in right now. 88% of the vote is in overall. Donald Trump still has a narrow lead, 51% to 47. Now it's 10% of the vote in. But he does have a lead. It's pretty close, I have to say, but still he's winning.
Right, and it's very early. As you noted, we just clicked up from 8 to 10%. So if you're watching at home, brew some coffee or get your beverage of choice. We do coffee in here, at least for now. So you're looking at the map and you're trying to figure out, are there any early clues here? The big answer is not yet. But the small answer in campaign headquarters is, well, what about the places that are most important to us? So if you're Donald Trump, that's here. That's Manchester. And you're looking at the early results there. You're seeing you're at 54%. This is the largest city, largest area of the state. And you're saying, okay, we're running 10 points ahead, a little short of that, a little shy of that, with about 40%, a little more than that vote. And so that's good, right? A lot of people.
Is that what he needs to do? A lot of people in Manchester.
Well, he would like to be higher. He had a bigger margin last time with more candidates. There was more space between him and second place. He's in a 2-point race now. So, that's in campaign war rooms or at analyst tables. That's what they're sitting around debating. That's enough. If he keeps that and wins in some of the other places, it's enough to get him a win. Then the question is, what's the margin? We'll have that conversation as we get higher than that. But you're looking at that if you're Donald Trump and you're saying, okay, so if you're in the Haley campaign, you're saying, wait, the second largest city, the third largest city, forgive me, Nashua is second, Concord is third. Wait, we're ahead there. That's up to about 95% of the estimated vote. And she's beating Donald Trump there. What's that, 8 points? So, you're saying, okay, this is one of the places where if we're going to win or come really close, we need to get votes here. And so that's a good sign for the Haley campaign early on. We're going to spend a lot of time, Jake, as the night goes on over here. All right, so this is Portsmouth right here. Donald Trump carried Portsmouth in 2016, a little shy of half the vote in so far. Nikki Haley running well ahead right here. Again, not a ton of votes in a Republican primary in Portsmouth. Portsmouth is likely to be blue come November. Not a ton of Republicans there, but you want to win it if you can. And so if you're in the Haley campaign headquarters, you're looking at that and you're saying, okay, that was one of the places we needed to take away from Donald Trump. That was a place we needed to get some votes. We're not there yet. We have more votes to count, but you're encouraged by that. You come up here, even more encouraging perhaps, Dover, you're moving more up the coast. This is an interesting mix. One of the fishermen in my piece, Andrew Konchak and his wife, they vote here. In my All Over the Map series, they vote here. Blue collar Trump voter, Andrew is. But you also have, suburban voters here. People have moved up the Haley campaign, about 70% in, carrying Dover. Again, if you're in the Haley campaign headquarters, you say, okay, that's one of the places we took a good look at. If our math is to work, we need Dover. Is that enough? We have a lot of votes to count. When we 30% still to count here as we go on. But that's what they're doing in campaign headquarters right now. And then they're calling around to their people, what's still out as we go. The rest of the map, that's Dixville Notch. That was the symbolic victory she got at midnight.
What's this?
So then you're climbing up toward the White Mountains here, Hart's location, right? This, like Dixville Notch,
they used to do early voting too.
They used to do it early night. Yeah, so look, there's 19 votes and you're halfway there. So this, not a lot of math. But I'm a broken record on this subject. Not a lot of math in many of these small towns. However, Donald Trump tends to win them and win most of them. And so that not a lot of math adds up when it's 20, 50, 100, 200, 300, 400. It adds up. So when you're looking at this, remember what he did in 2016. But look down here. Look down here. That's all Donald Trump, right? The suburbs of New Hampshire, the biggest population centers in New Hampshire are inside that green line. And so that's 2016. Come forward to 2024. There's a little yellow in there right now. If there's more yellow in there as we get through the night, then Haley is in play. That's what we need to watch. Right here in eastern New Hampshire, along the coast, and then go across central New Hampshire along the Massachusetts border. If she can fill some of that in yellow, she's in play. But we got a ways to go. We're at 10%, but that's a close race.
Yeah, and if these numbers hold out, and who knows if they will or not, we're only at 10%. But if these numbers hold out, one of the arguments you're going to have is that strong enough for a man who is essentially running as an incumbent and really has the power of the establishment behind him, or does that indicate weakness? But this is not the final number, so we should pretend it is. We're going to throw it to Anderson. We're going to go to Dana Bash in Manchester right now. Dana.
Thanks, Jake. Just watching the numbers on the map there and getting information from my sources that I know you guys are as well. They are, particularly in the Haley campaign right now, they're watching some very important suburban towns or well-populated towns with more traditional, as you call them, country club Republicans earlier. And they're just hoping and praying that their numbers really are pumped in those areas in order to even come closer, at all close to Donald Trump.
Yeah, I mean, there are certain places, obviously, a place like Bedford. I mean, there are, as there are in every state, every electoral, there are certain parts that are more moderate, certain parts that are more conservative, certain parts that are more independent, some parts that are more Republican. And, you know, you can go talk to the advisors for both camps and they'll say, well, this is where we got to do strong. This is where we have to underperform. And this is where we hope to. Talking to the Trump people this afternoon, you know, their first line was a win is a win. And I suppose they'll take it. But they were really counting, they are really counting on a double-digit win. I think their feeling is if it's in double digits, that would be a significant win, particularly in a state like New Hampshire that is not typical, that is much more favorable to Haley than a lot of the other states and a lot of the other contests. And you know, this is going to be interesting to see as the night goes on, and we're very early in the night as to whether or not they are able to exceed that double-digit number or not.
Right. And, you know, New Hampshire sometimes counts a little bit slowly. So we have some suspense here, right? So the smart Republicans that I'm talking to, like people that have run these races for years in the past, they've kind of got two lists going. And I was really interested to see when John put up those pink counties that went for John Kasich, because that's one group of them. One group of them are the places, the towns where John Kasich won in 2016, right? So Nikki Haley really has to outperform in those towns. I got a list of, 14, Jackson, Bartlett, Easton, Orford, Lyme, it goes on. Then there are towns where Trump performed under 30% and Kasich came within striking distance, and Nikki Haley really needs to overperform there. And the key one, we've talked about this a lot already tonight, is Concord, which is about an hour north of where we are, 45 minutes
And
north
where she is
of
tonight.
where we are, and which exactly. And I think that tells you everything you need to know.
And speaking of where she is, she was in Salem last night, and Salem is in Rockingham County, which was along the eastern side there that John was showing us. That is the yellow part of the state where she has to do well, and that is exactly why she ended the night. A lot of former Massachusetts residents have moved to New Hampshire, of course, and they live around Salem. It is a very fast-growing area.
For those people here.
We will not. We will not. It's a two-syllable.
It's also
word.
where the governor grew up.
Exactly. And
Where the
speaking of the
Sununu's
governor,
grew up.
they also have been looking at where Trump underperformed Governor Sununu. That is a key thing. I mean, Trump won the New Hampshire primary in 2016, but he lost the general election very narrowly to Hillary Clinton and by a pretty wide margin to Joe Biden. So they are looking at all these counties, but look at Salem. That is one thing that the Haley campaign is looking at right tonight. They think they can wring out a lot of those undeclared voters. It's why she closed her campaign in a packed rally last night. We'll see if it paid off.
I don't know that we can specifically say, though, that it's Trump versus Kasich from 2016 and that's what the key is. Because remember, it was a crowded field. Jeb Bush was in the field. Chris Christie was in the field. One would assume the more moderate votes like that would be going to Haley. Conversely, Ted Cruz was in the field. You'd assume his vote. So, you have to kind of add up all the conservatives or more MAGA Republicans of 2016 versus all of the more country club Republicans of 2016.
Well, and they are, I've got some numbers that they're looking at in that case too. They're assuming kind of exactly as you broke it down, but it still gives us a little bit of a map, right? To kind of look in these interesting places where maybe there's more willingness among people who are still in the Republican Party to actually vote for someone that isn't Donald Trump. I mean, that's really the big question.
One number in the exit poll that does worry the Haley folks, the feelings if Trump wins, 56% say they're fine with that. So that's the bottom line to all of this. And it should be a worrying sign to the Biden campaign as well, because some of these people voting for her tonight may vote Republican in the general as well. So, but keep an eye on southern New Hampshire. We're all hearing that from our sources.
And that number really gives us even more of a hint of why she has been teetering on the edge of really going after Donald Trump. I mean, she certainly stepped up her comments about him across the board, but hasn't gone into the sort of high gear. And that number is very likely why.
Exactly. Despite the governor trying to urge her that direction.
Yeah, he was trying to do it for her.
I got to just say one quick thing. Chris Sununu, if she does well and has a victory, whether it's literally a victory or single digits, she owes a lot of it to the governor. Chris Sununu has been a better campaigner for her than she's been for herself.
All right, we're going to toss it back to Jake in Washington. Jake?
All right, Dana, thanks so much. Let's get a new key race alert. With 11% of the estimated vote in, Donald Trump is still in the lead with 52.2% of the vote. He has 19,185 votes. That's roughly 2,000 votes ahead of Nikki Haley, who is in second place in a two-person race with 46.8% of the vote. It's only 11% of the vote in, but as of right now, Donald Trump has the lead. The last New Hampshire polls close in just a few minutes. From now, that's our first chance to potentially project a winner in 9 minutes, 29 seconds. The final two major Republican presidential candidates have obviously a lot riding on this primary. Donald Trump seeking total dominance over the race and an early lock on the Republican nomination. Nikki Haley staking her campaign on New Hampshire as she tries to find a path forward in an uphill battle against Trump and the Republican establishment. Let's check in with Kristen Holmes at Trump headquarters in Nashua, New Hampshire. Kristen, as of now, the number is tighter than probably the Trump team wants them to be, but still he's in the lead.
Yeah, that's right, Jake. And the thing to keep in mind here is that they did say they thought that he could win by double digits. Obviously, the margin is smaller now than what they expected. The big goal for them was to win by a definitive margin and put this to bed so that they could pivot to the general election. I was told that if the margin was decisive enough, that they would start reaching out to these critical swing states to expand their infrastructure there, talking about states like Georgia, Arizona, Michigan, as they have their eye on a potential rematch with President Biden. Those, of course, are states that Biden won in 2020, but they view as very competitive. The smaller the margin, the more likely it is that Nikki Haley stays in the race, and that's going to cause more difficulties for Trump. Now, the one thing I will note is that the campaign doesn't see a scenario long term in which Trump is not the GOP nominee. They are tracking polls in several states in which they believe that he will win the delegate count for. And one of the things that we have reported is that they've actually worked with state parties to change delegate systems in a way that will end up favoring Donald Trump in the long run in this primary season. But that doesn't mean that if Nikki Haley does well tonight, that this is going to be an easy process. It's something they're watching obviously very closely. They think that this will, of course, prolong the fight. Jake? All
right, interesting stuff. Now let's go to Kylie Atwood at Nikki Haley's campaign headquarters in New Hampshire, in Concord, New Hampshire. And Kylie, you're getting a new read on Governor Haley's expectations tonight. What is that?
Yeah, I mean, Nikki Haley has been saying, over the course of the last few days, she wants a strong showing, not defining it. But I'm told by her aides that they think that the results are going to be closer than recent polls have shown. I'm also told that they believe that if there's high turnout, it's going to be a better night for Nikki Haley. That's something, obviously, that you guys have been talking about. And Nikki Haley herself has been texting with people close to her today, I'm told by a source close to her. And one of the things that they've been discussing in a positive light are what they see as reports of high turnout. And campaign aides, for their part, have also been talking to their teams in the field throughout the entire day. And they were welcoming reports coming in of high turnout in places that they were looking at incredibly closely. Now, another interesting thing, Jake, is that Nikki Haley stayed up quite late last night. According to one campaign aide, she stayed up past midnight to see those results come in from Dixville Notch, which opens its doors to voters at midnight. All 6 of those voters in that tiny town in northern New Hampshire voted for Nikki Haley. And so they obviously felt good about that. And I just want to bring you inside the room here at the campaign headquarters, where we have all of these Haley supporters who are cheering in the background. CNN is on, and every time that there is a positive development for Nikki Haley's campaign, they're cheering, putting their hands up. A lot of energy right here.
All right, Kylie Atwood, thanks so much. Let's go to Nashua right now. And Kate Baldwin, who is at, it looks like, it's closing time there, Kate Baldwin. What are you still doing there?
Well, I'm staying to the last minute for you, for the record, Jake. We are minutes away now from Nashua Ward 3 to hitting that 8 p.m. mark. Nashua Ward 3 is one of, by our count, 32 locations in the state that are staying open until 8 p.m. I'll say from about the 7 p.m. mark until now, the traffic has really died down, but we still are seeing people coming and voting in these final minutes. The last vote count from the machine that I just got from my friends, 2,235 ballots cast. Again, as a reminder for context, in Ward 3, there are just under 5,000 registered voters. We're going to know very soon what all of that means. Come with me, though. Let's go outside. We have another new friend, a voter that has been kind enough to stay out in the cold for me to speak. Paul.
This is not cold compared to Iowa.
Thank you. Paul and I are just officially best friends. Talk to me about your vote tonight. Who did you vote for?
I did end up going with Donald Trump. I did say to Carolyn that it was close to a flip of a coin between Trump and Haley.
Why?
Well, I think Haley's a little bit closer to the middle. I felt that more recently she kind of her message came across more negative, and I felt that Trump has kind of left some of the past behind him, and we're not hearing like vengeance language. And
Did
things
you
like
vote?
that.
Have you voted for Trump before?
Yeah, both elections.
Okay.
And I, unfortunately, like most of the country, I feel like we have polar opposite candidates, and there's no one in the middle. I think there should be. I'm registered undeclared, and a question was asked of me, would I vote, Democrat or Republic? And I would vote either if they were a little closer to the middle, because there's policies that
matter to you.
That matter to me, and I think
great.
people vote that way.
That's a lot of people should vote that way and are voting that way. And we're going to find out much more in just minutes from now. Paul, thank you so much. Back to you guys.
All right, Kate Baldwin in Nashua, New Hampshire, in one of the voting locations that is still open at this hour, but it's going to shut down in just a few minutes there. And there's Vox Populi. That's who's voting. Nashua, where Kate Baldwin is, that Nikki Haley really needs Nashua to go her way.
She certainly would like it. It's right here along the Massachusetts border. It's the second largest city. 6.6% of the population. We don't have any official votes yet.
Still open.
Let's just go back in time. Let's go back in time and look. Donald Trump won with 35% of the vote. Again, with so many candidates, one of the things you're looking at tonight is right now, Nikki Haley's close to the former incumbent president of the United States. So that's a big deal. You're 6 points behind Donald Trump. That's a pretty strong race. The question is it strong enough? And can you narrow the gap? But one thing we have to remember throughout the night when we do these comparisons is you had 10 candidates on the ballot. And so some of the gaps in the areas were different. But Donald Trump won Nashua in 2016. You're coming back, and I'm going to come back to this. I'll probably come back to this several times throughout the night. But I just got to draw the strip like this way down here. Actually, come inside of Manchester, right? Come inside. Look at the inside line, because Manchester's Trump country, a more gritty city. We'll see how well she does there, and then just come forward to 2024, right? And then let's just bring this up a little bit so we can see it. At the moment, we're waiting for more votes to come in, but at the moment, you see some yellow inside the inner line. That's what Nikki Haley has to do, and that's in Portsmouth. That's in Dover here, where I'm waiting to see if more votes came in. They're up to 70%. So if you're in the Haley campaign headquarters and you're looking town by town, you have a long way to go. But at least at the moment, so the places you need to fill in yellow are filling in yellow for her. So you watch it. But again, 12%, 6-point race. You raised the question earlier. If she ends like that, what does that mean, right? We're nowhere near there, but that'll be the analyst conversation, the fundraiser conversation, and everything like that. That's it. You're running a strong race right now against the faraway frontrunner in the Republican Party. Just a little quirk of history. We like these counties that we look at, the counties that tend to get it right, or the cities. That New Hampshire, I'm going to say counties because that's normally what we're doing. Townships and cities. Yeah. Townships and cities, they're within counties, but we count them by township here. Rochester, 2.3% of the population, the 6th largest township in the state. Birthplace of the gadfly presidential candidate Lyndon LaRouche, right? I know these little things. They've gotten it right in the Republican primary for 70 years. Donald Trump is leading there right now. Records die. Vigo County, Indiana went down in the last presidential election. Records die, but it's just one of the places you look at that have a history. And at the moment, Donald Trump is leading there. And more important for Donald Trump, he's leading at the moment in Manchester. We're up to 57% of the vote. It's a little above 10-point lead there. This is his blue-collar urban base in New Hampshire. Most of Trump's blue-collar support, you think of rural, but at the moment, Jake, he's doing quite well there. So you pull out to the map and you look. You also get late votes in Manchester. You get early reports, but then they tend to fill in late as we get through it. If you're looking elsewhere in the map, it's one of those hard to knows, right? I just want to look at Dover to see what the margin is again. 71% of the vote in there. You come down along the seacoast. This is an area where I think Dan and her friends were calling them country club Republicans, but there are also a lot of blue collar people as well. That's what makes the mix so interesting as you see it come out. Portsmouth, she's up by a huge margin with about half of the vote in. So it's early, Jake, but here we go.
Here we go indeed. The last polling places are closing in New Hampshire, and we now have a key race alert on where the Republican presidential race stands right now. As of now, it is too early to call the Republican presidential primary in New Hampshire. Donald Trump is taking an early lead in the vote over Nikki Haley with 12% of the vote in. Donald Trump has 52.4% of the vote. Nikki Haley is about 2,300 votes behind that with 46.6% of the vote. But there is still 88% of the vote outstanding. It's too early to make a projection in the Republican primary race as of now. But we do have a projection we can make right now. And CNN is projecting that President Biden will win as a write-in candidate in the Democratic primary in New Hampshire over multiple challengers who were on the actual ballot. Remember, this primary is not sanctioned by the Democratic Party here in Washington, D.C., and it does not count for delegates. Still, the DNC did not want Biden to lose, and he did pull off a write-in candidate victory in a primary that is not official. Now that the voting has ended, we can reveal more specific exit poll information about the Trump-Haley face-off for you. David Chalian has those numbers. David.
Jake, now that the polls have closed, we can look more at how voters are splitting between Haley and Trump. So take a look here. Among registered Republicans, which make up 50% of the electorate, Donald Trump is winning 74% of them to Nikki Haley's 24%, a 50-point lead with half the electorate, the Republicans. Now, those registered undeclareds, they make up a slightly smaller share, 47% of the electorate. Haley's winning them 66% to 32%, so she's winning them by a narrower, slightly narrower margin than Trump is winning Republicans, and they're a slightly smaller group. As for the education divide, it's not just in American politics broadly, it is also within this Republican nomination race in New Hampshire. College graduates make up 48% of the electorate. Haley wins them by 20 points, 58% to Donald Trump's 39%. Voters without a college degree make up a slightly larger share, 52% of the electorate today in New Hampshire, and Trump wins them by a big margin, 66% to Haley's 32%. So again, we're seeing Donald Trump win these slightly larger groups by bigger margins than Haley's winning the groups where she has strength.
All right, interesting stuff. David Chalian, thanks so much. Aaron?
All right, Jake. All right. So as we just go through these latest numbers that we have, which we were able to share because the polls have now closed. Kate Baldwin was talking about 32 polling sites or so that closed at 8, now closed. So, Jamie, what are you hearing from the Haley campaign?
So for the last hour, we have to start by saying there is an expectations game here, and they want to set that up. But they have been telling me for the last hour that they think she is doing better than expected. What does that mean? The latest poll showed her behind Trump by double digits. So if these numbers hold, and it is still very early, and we're just talking about a small number, but if it is within single digits, what they're saying to me is that's a win for them, but coming in first is the win. Coming in second, even, under 10%, still means you're coming in second. That said, I think what they're looking for here is a reason to keep her in the race, which no matter what Donald Trump says, we know it will make him crazy if she stays in the race.
And to your exact point, I mean, the expectations game is really going haywire at this point. This is the state that is incredibly favorable to a candidate like Nikki Haley. Undeclared voters, a lot of independent voters. She should be performing really well here. She should be giving Trump really the most run for his money that he's gotten so far or may ever get in this race. There were some polls leading up to this moment that had her potentially within single digits of him, a very close race. So that, I think, to me, that is really where the expectations are for Haley, regardless of what her campaign
It doesn't get
says.
better than this in terms of a
It
setup.
really does not get better than this for her. And so how she performs tonight will impact how they look at the race going forward. It's going to be hard to convince these Republican voters, almost 60% of whom are fine with Donald Trump, to say, well, let's just do this again for a few more months. Many Republicans are pretty much ready to see this thing settled.
Can I tell you what the Trump team is worried about? And that's underperforming. They don't think he's going to lose New Hampshire tonight. And obviously we're waiting to see what the numbers show, but they are worried about underperforming. This was the state that delivered Trump his grasp of the Republican Party in 2016. He went in there, he got 100,000 votes, I believe. Obviously, there were many more candidates still in the race. It was much more competitive at that point, but they are hoping to see him have a real big margin here. And if they don't, That's what his concern is. That's why he's been talking about and pushing a false claim that Democrats can vote in today's election. As we know, they can't. The cutoff, as every official in New Hampshire has reminded us, including Republicans, was back in October. But Trump has been pushing that. He's also been addressing this argument that has been made by Nikki Haley in the closing days, which is that she is more electable than Donald Trump is in a race against Joe Biden. He's just posting about it in all caps on his website moments ago, because it is a real concern of his, of what his electability is going to be. It's also a concern that Ron DeSantis is sharing. People like Bob Good, the congressman who's the head of the House Freedom Caucus, they have also, despite the fact that they've endorsed Trump, have also raised concerns about what the longevity for his success is, despite how well he
I mean, I think two things can be true at the same time. One, he could be having a night that he's going to win the New Hampshire, that he could be on his way to winning the nomination, but also could raise real warning signs about his viability as a general election candidate. That number about undeclared voters, 66% of undeclared voters supporting Haley, just 32% for Donald Trump. That is something that the Trump campaign needs to pay attention to if he is indeed the nominee. Just in 2016, he won undeclared voters in New Hampshire in the primary over a much more crowded field. In that crowded field, he took about 36% of the crowded field. He only got 32% in a two-person race. It shows you the challenges that he is facing here. But not only that, 88% of Haley supporters say they'd be disappointed if he were the nominee. 47% don't believe he'd be fit to be president if he were convicted of a crime. All of these things they need to be clearly worried about, regardless of how he does, regardless if he wins the nomination, and things they need to work on if you're to broaden his.
Jeff Zeleny raised a point a moment ago, though, Abby, and I think it goes at what you were talking about. You talk about the general election issue, this issue with independents, but then look at the Republicans. 74% of them went for Trump. That is resounding, and it is loud and clear. And when you look ahead, South Carolina and other states that are not going to have this independent play, that is perhaps a more accurate snapshot.
We are headed into territory where people are dyed-in-the-wool Republican voters, and they are loyal, and maybe they are open-minded. We're hearing from a lot of voters who are Republicans who are open-minded. They want to see some kind of primary process, but many of them are willing to come right on home to Donald Trump. I spoke to a New Hampshire voter just last night on my show. She was as a Haley supporter, but she said that she's taking her cues from Chris Sununu in how to act toward Trump. She's ready to back Trump if Haley does not prevail tonight. So a lot of Republicans in New Hampshire and elsewhere in this electorate are there looking at people like Chris Sununu, who is a staunch Nikki Haley supporter, who says even if Trump is convicted, even if he is a felon, he will vote for Donald Trump. Many Republican voters feel exactly the same.
Also, what a permission structure for people to vote for Trump. Chris Wallace was saying, you know, if Nikki Haley does well, she owes a lot of it to Chris Wallace. Or I'm sorry, not to Chris Wallace, to Governor Sununu. I also think if the opposite is true, it raises a lot of questions about, you know, the power of a Chris Sununu, a family name, a very popular governor in New Hampshire, that he is even willing to vote for Donald Trump if he's a convicted felon. Also allowing that permission structure for other Republicans to say, okay, well, I'm just going to vote for Donald Trump.
They're doing it. All right, all stay with us because we're counting the votes. They are coming in. We'll see how close this is, who the winner is. Jake.
All right, Aaron, thanks so much. We got 15% of the vote in as of right now. These are actual votes. Donald Trump still in the lead, 53% of the vote. He is roughly 3,400 votes ahead of Nikki Haley, who is pulling up the rear with 46% of the vote about.
Right, and if you listen to the last exit poll presentation after the final polls closed from David Chalian, that's an electorate that leans in Trump's favor, and that Nikki Haley's winning big, you know, among the moderate voters maybe, but the education line where Donald Trump is winning by such a big margin among high school educated voters. Just to go back to the 2016 map, that's a lot of the blue collar voters that you see up in here. Right. Spent some time up here last week going through these areas up here, small towns, construction workers, people who work at the seasonal resorts, people work with their hands. So we're waiting for these votes to come in. The exit polls tell you that as that fills in, not only red, but how red, right? When you look at the margin. So if you're in the Haley campaign and you know that and you're seeing that, what are you looking at? Number one, you are encouraged. Let's go through the areas where you're encouraged. Portsmouth, Donald Trump won Portsmouth. It's a Democratic town, but there are still Republican voters there.
Lovely town.
Right, Donald Trump won it. It's a beautiful town. Donald Trump won it, and she took it. She's taking it away. We're not done yet, but about half the vote right there. That's your goal. He won it last time. You want to take it from him, you got to take things away. The key, Jake, is we just don't have yet right along here forgive me if you're turning my back at home. I just want to stretch this out. Let's come along the southern border, right? So what are we going to get out of Nashua, right? Do we get, Haley needs it to win or to get really close. She needs to do very well here. It's the second largest city inside New Hampshire. Then
no votes yet.
No votes next.
They just closed.
Then you come over to Hollis next, another place, essentially the Nashua suburbs along here, a place that Donald Trump carried last time where the Haley campaign thinks, okay, if we're doing as well as we think we can do, it's a place like here. So when you pull it out, we just need to wait and get more votes as you come through it. That she's winning Concord is great. Just you come up here. These are the small little towns, right? So you're at 95%, 56 to 42. Just want to go back in time. So you're looking at Donald Trump's math comes from these small places. A couple hundred people, but he wins by big margins. That's not a huge margin.
That's how he won Pennsylvania in 2016.
Exactly right. Small town America. So last time it was a 10-point gap, right? Yep. There were a whole bunch of candidates. It was 10 points over the last candidate. So now in a smaller race, it's a much bigger gap. Does that matter in the end, right? You say people at home are saying, well, that's just a couple hundred votes between them. The challenge is when you got 260 townships, a couple hundred votes here, a couple hundred votes here, a couple dozen votes there, that's what Trump needs to offset. Plus, he has this. At the moment, Donald Trump is winning by, what's that, just shy of 14 points, 13 points, if you round Haley up there, in the largest vote pool in the state of New Hampshire. That's Manchester. It's 8% of the statewide population. About 2/3 of the vote in there, too. And you're seeing this is blue-collar Trump country. Again, she's running a strong race against the guy who was the incumbent president of the United States. But in the place where you get the most votes, you pad your lead there with the biggest pool of voters, and then you run it up in the small towns. And so as we watch this go out, we're 15% still. As we get to 20, 25, 30, you need a lot of yellow down here for Haley to stay in play.
And the wild cards, obviously, are the number of undeclared or independent voters who Haley seems to have won hands down, right? And so the question is, how many of them turned out and where did they turn out?
Right. The composition of the electorate, which slightly benefits Trump by the exit polls, but again, the higher undeclared. But I just want to make one key point. That's true on paper when you look at it. But New Hampshire's a quirky state in the sense that a lot of Trump's voters don't like the establishment. They're Trump Republicans,
right?
But they don't want to be registered Republicans. So you will find Trump voters who say they're undeclared. Now they are as loyal to Trump as you can get. They just don't think they want to register with a party because they don't like anything big, anything with a name. They don't like the media. They don't like the Republican Party. They don't like the United
They don't
States
like Mitch McConnell.
Right, yeah.
They don't like Governor Sununu, probably.
I don't want to not make clear that is her opportunity.
Right.
Undeclared, more moderate voters who want to come in and help her, a lot of them have not only don't want to vote for Donald Trump, some of them have animus toward Donald Trump. So they want to help somebody. They want to help the anti-Trump force. Some of it's personal to her. Some of it is personal about him.
Well, and if you looked at the exit polls, more people voting for Haley were actually voting against Trump,
right?
A plurality at least, than were voting for Haley. What are the big population centers that we're still waiting for? Obviously, we're going to go to Cape Baldwin right now. All right, Cape Baldwin is in Nashua, where they just shut down. They just closed the polls at 8 o'clock. Cape Baldwin, tell us what's going on there and how Trump and Haley did in your ward.
From the active vote tallying.
Polls are closed.
The polls are closed. I'm Jared Holland, the moderator of Ward 3.
Jed Holland, the ward moderator, is now going to read the totals after a long day's work.
Yes, these are machine-generated totals. These do not include any write-in votes. The machine does not recognize handwriting. Our human team will be going over all of the ballots, looking for those write-in votes. So this is a preliminary score only. The number will increase as we read the write-in votes and as we count the necessarily hand-counted ballots. This is not a final result. In the Republican Party for President of the United States, we have 0 undervotes. Sorry, forgive me. We have 0 overvotes. This is mechanically enforced by the machine. We have 3 undervotes. Those are ballots that made it through without any vote cast. And then the numbers for the candidates. Doug Burgum, 2 votes. Robert S. Carney Jr., 2 votes. John Anthony Castro, 0 votes. Chris Christie, 11 votes. Ron DeSantis, 12 votes. Nikki Haley, 691 votes. Asa Hutchinson, 1 vote. Peter Jeddick, 0 votes. Perry Johnson, 0 votes. Donald Kiornis, 0 votes. Mary Maxwell, 1 vote. Glenn J. McPeters, 0 votes. S. Peterson Merrill, 0 votes. Darius L. Mitchell, 0 votes. Mike Pence, 4 votes. Vivek Ramaswamy, 4 votes. Tim Scott, 2 votes. Hirsch V. Singh, 0 votes. Samuel Howard Sloan, 0 votes. David Stuckenberg, 0 votes. Rachel Swift, 1 vote. Donald J. Trump, 771 votes. Scott Allen Avers.
All right,
0
so
votes.
there it is, the
Brian
numbers
L.
we're
Winkler,
waiting for. No, I'm not
0
referring to
votes.
Samuel Howard Sloan or Rachel
And
Swift. I'm
write-in
talking about
votes
Nikki
by
Haley
count are
and Donald
6.
Trump and John
I do
King.
not have-
Nashua is an area where Haley needs to do really well. And at least in this one ward, she came in second.
One ward, so be careful. We'll get the rest of the votes, and we'll see Nashua start to fill in as they first. You just saw the local official there. He reports them to Secretary of State. They get put into the system, and you'll see them pop up in the map. And as we happened with Sarah Seidner earlier, the first thing to pop up in Nashua on the map may not be that ward. So we have to walk through as this goes. But to the big picture we were talking about. Let me slide this out of the way just a little bit. Move it here. Let me move it over here for a second. I'm going to obscure votes. I'll probably take it back in a minute. If you're looking at the state itself, come back here. All right, Nikki Haley needs to do well along the southern part of the state, number one, particularly in Nashua, because it's the second largest population center. Manchester is your largest city. It is a Trump country. She's competitive there right now, but well behind him. So if you want to match that, he's leading at the moment. Looks like he's on a path to win in the biggest pool of votes. You need to match that here. In the second largest pool of votes, again, this is one ward. But this is Donald Trump making a statement that, no, I'm competitive down here. Again, right along the Massachusetts border. Tends to be, if you get the southernmost part, tends to be a little more blue collar. You move up to Nashua, it looks much more suburban. You move up here and you go through it. But it's one ward, so we need to count the rest of them. But if you're in the campaigns and you're watching, this is what they do. They have people in the wards. They're calling it, just like we're watching it live, they're calling it as it comes. If you're Donald Trump, you're thinking, of course you want to win everywhere. You want to win by big margins. But in a place that Nikki Haley wants to take away from you, at least in this one ward, Trump is holding his own. That's very close. That's very close, very competitive for her there, but not the victory if she's trying to go to a path to win. Let's come back out to the statewide numbers now. If she's trying to come back to a path to win, and right now with 16% of the vote, Donald Trump has an 8-point lead on you right there. You can't have too many wards like this. You need to start winning wards and then winning towns to build up from there. It's just one will count more. But again, Jake, that's the great value of having people right on the ground like that. Nashua is still blank on our map, but those votes will kick in soon enough.
All right, we can now make a major projection. CNN projects that Donald J. Trump will win the Republican presidential primary in New Hampshire. The former president scoring his second decisive victory of 2024, delivering a powerful blow to his only remaining major opponent, primary opponent, Nikki Haley. Trump taking a critical step toward winning his third Republican presidential nomination. Again, CNN projecting Donald Trump will win the Republican primary in New Hampshire. And we should note that it has never happened that somebody won Iowa and New Hampshire and then did not go on to win their party's nomination. Kristen Holmes is at Trump HQ. Kristen, big victory for Donald Trump.
Yeah, this absolutely is a big victory. Of course, the big question for the Trump team is going to be, what are the margins? They never thought that he was going to lose. Well, I wouldn't say never. I would say about 2 weeks ago, they were touch and go on what the polling looked like and whether or not Haley could pull this out. But recently, they thought that Trump was going to win. The question was whether or not it was going to be double digits or a slimmer margin. I was told by one senior advisor they were hoping for at least 7%. Obviously, it's still too early to look at those margins, but there is a lot of enthusiasm and excitement here.
Kristen, we're going to go to Nikki Haley, who's speaking right now. Let's listen to Governor Haley.
What a great night. God is so good all the time. Thank you, New Hampshire, for the love, the kindness, the support, and a great night here tonight. Thank you so much. I want want to first say thank you to my husband, who I know is watching right now. I love you. We're excited to have you. Thank you. I want to thank my kids who are here, Rita and Naylan and Josh, who have really kind of stepped up and just given me the support I need. You know, you really pull on your family when something like this happens, and I am incredibly blessed by their support. I have my parents at home, and I will always say that the way they raised me, to know that we lived in the best country in the world, but to also know that the best way you appreciate your blessings is to give back. Thank you, Mom and Dad. I love you so much. To my siblings, to my in-laws, to everybody back at home, to Vicki for helping me take care of Mom and Dad. Thank you for that. You know, I will tell you, it feels like it's been a lifetime, but it has been almost a year that we've been campaigning in New Hampshire, touching every hand, answering every question, being the last person to leave. And we had the most amazing thing happen is the second that we got the endorsement from Governor Chris Sununu. I mean, a true governor that doesn't stand behind a podium. He shows up at a diner. He shows up at the brewery. He loves the people of New Hampshire. He has been with me every single day at every single event. Chris, I couldn't have done it without you. And I want to thank someone who was with me on day one. He's a patriot. He's a hardcore conservative. And he is my friend, General Don Bolduc. And Sharon, thank you so much. I want to congratulate Donald Trump on his victory tonight. He earned it, and I want to acknowledge that. Now, you've all heard the chatter among the political class. They're falling all over themselves, saying this race is over. Well, I have news for all of them. New Hampshire is first in the nation. It is not the last in the nation. This race is far from over. There are dozens of states left to go. And the next one is my sweet state of South Carolina. At one point in this campaign, there were 14 of us running, and we were at 2% in the polls. Well, I'm a fighter. And I'm scrappy. And now we're the last one standing next to Donald Trump. And today we got close to half of the vote. We still have a ways to go, but we keep moving up. For a lot of people, politics is way too personal. It's not personal for me. I voted for Trump twice. I was proud to serve America in his cabinet. I agree with many of his policies. I decided to run because I'm worried about the future of our country and because it's time to put the negativity and chaos behind us. We have an economy that's crushing middle-class Americans. We have a border that is totally open and dangerous, creating a disaster in our country.
Unbelievable!
We have schools that are failing too many of our children, and we have a world on fire with a war in Europe and the Middle East and a huge and growing threat from China. And then you look at Washington, D.C. We have a Congress that fights about everything and accomplishes nothing. And we have Joe Biden in the White House making one bad decision after another, when he's making any decisions at all. Our country's in a real mess. And the question is, who's going to fix it? With Donald Trump, Republicans have lost almost every competitive election. We lost the Senate. We lost the House. We lost the White House. We lost in 2018. We lost in 2020. And we lost in 2022. The worst kept secret in politics is how badly the Democrats want to run against Donald Trump. They know Trump is the only Republican in the country who Joe Biden can defeat. You can't fix the mess if you don't win an election. A Trump nomination is a Biden win and a Kamala Harris presidency. I defeat Biden handily. With Donald Trump, you have one bout of chaos after another. This court case, that controversy, this tweet, that senior moment. You can't fix Joe Biden's chaos with Republican chaos. The other day, Donald Trump accused me of not providing security at the Capitol on January 6th. Now, I've long called for mental competency tests for politicians over the age of 75. Trump claims he'd do better than me in one of those tests. Maybe he would, maybe he wouldn't. But if he thinks that, then he should have no problem standing on a debate stage with me. Most Americans do not want a rematch between Biden and Trump. The first party to retire its 80-year-old candidate is going to be the party that wins this election. And I think it should be the Republicans that win this election. So our fight is not over because we have a country to save. In the next 2 months, millions of voters in over 20 states will have their say. We should honor them and allow them to vote. And guess what? In the next 2 months, Joe Biden isn't going to get any younger or any better. We'll have all the time we need to defeat Joe Biden. When we get to South Carolina, Donald Trump's going to have a harder time falsely attacking me. The great people of South Carolina know I cut their taxes. They know I signed the toughest illegal immigration bill in the country. They know we passed voter ID and tort reform and ethics reform. And they know we moved 35,000 people from welfare to work. Every time I've run for office in South Carolina, I've beaten the political establishment. They're lined up against me again. That's no surprise. But South Carolina voters don't want a coronation. They want an election. And we're going to give them one. Because we are just getting started. Thank you for the energy. Thank you for the love, New Hampshire. We're going home to South Carolina.
Nikki Haley saying we are just getting started here with the team in New York. Get back, Rod.
Look, I feel for her because I've been in this. I've seen campaigns in this kind of situation before. I've been in this kind of situation before. The fact is, you know, when you set out to win a primary and you don't win it, it's hard to spin it into a victory, and you can't keep doing it. In Iowa, she was going to finish second. She finished third. In New Hampshire, she was going to win. And tonight, you know, we'll see how the final numbers come in. It seems to be widening a little bit. I really question. I mean, I question whether she really ultimately wants to go forward to South Carolina and put her popularity to a test in her home state. And I'm wondering whether her supporters and her financiers, her donors are going to want to do that too. I mean, I think the handwriting's on the wall.
I agree with David. I mean, she started off wobbly. Man, I thought she was going to quit tonight. She got wobbly, and then she kind of found herself. And if you're kind of listening to her, you can find some hope. And you can get excited. You can say, hey, listen, you're proud to see that she's still got the fight in her. I loved her line. The first party to retire their 80-year-old candidate will win. I think that's a new line for her. And then she walks off stage and you got 4 weeks of every Republican in the world walking across the street, endorsing Donald Trump and throwing spitballs at you for 4 weeks. And then you go to South Carolina to get humiliated in your home state. I don't think this is going to be a great month for you. It's a great speech, but it may be her last one.
We got close to half the vote.
Yeah.
That was the big payoff tonight. We got close to half the vote.
A two-person race.
In a two-person race. By the way, in a two-person race in which a huge chunk of the voters are not actual registered Republicans.
Also in a two-person race where one of the folks did something like 77, 75 events across the state. And one did one a day and spent the rest of the time in a courtroom that he didn't even have to be at. And I think you can tell that the former president believes that's a better use of his time, to be standing outside of courtrooms, going in and out of courtrooms. And because people in their sort of media ecosystems are being told that the current White House is a kind of like a Dr. Doolittle situation or something, they see Biden in a way that he is very vulnerable. So they don't look at all the minuses that might be sort of described here and say, oh, that could be a problem for us.
Well, and what's remarkable here is her best line is to say that she defeats Joe Biden handily. She performs better in a general election by far than Trump does. All the polling bears that out. And you're going to see a lot of endorsements over the next couple of days from prominent Republicans. We saw John Cornyn tonight for Donald Trump, Barrasso, many of whom I know would actually prefer to support Nikki Haley, but the momentum, the pressure, and the GOP party infrastructure is built to support Donald Trump. He's already set up the Nevada primary, so it's basically rigged in his favor. All the Super Tuesday states are winner take all. So this
Alyssa,
isn't
help us
something.
Understand you have had this very kind of singular focus on what it means for the general election. From your position as someone who has like kind of worked in that world, can you conduct an entire Republican primary talking about the general? You still got to get through the next couple of weeks.
Well, and to the point that Van made, if the primary voters actually think that Joe Biden is so weak that even the fact that Trump doesn't beat him that much in the polls, they think he is so weak that they're fine going with Trump, even though Nikki is a much safer bet for actually winning a general
Listen,
election.
presidential politics isn't horseshoes, okay? You don't get close and win. You gotta
go
score.
from the expectation is I'm going to win to I got close to half the
Let me
vote.
bring in Jamie Gangel. Jamie?
So, Anderson, we've been hearing earlier this evening that there was a debate in the Haley campaign about whether to stay in or get out. We now know that she's staying in. And I'm told it's not just sort of tonight's speech in the spur of the moment. A senior person on the campaign said to me, of course she's staying in. And the way they see it is that there are now 2 states where Trump barely got half the vote. They think that's weak for an incumbent. But as we've said over and over, a win is a win. She has not been doing well in South Carolina. But here's something that I think was key from her speech. She said that he should have no trouble standing on a debate stage with her. I think you are going to hear this over and over again. Nikki Haley is going to be saying to Donald Trump, why are you scared to debate me? Anderson?
Jamie, thanks very much. Back with the team here in New York. Does that work?
In what position is she to make demands of the person who just defeated her in 2 straight states? I mean, Trump's strategy of staying out of these debates has proven to be smart, obviously. Is he really going to change course on that? He's not scrambling for attention.
There's not a groundswell of people saying we want to hear a debate between those two. I mean,
look, there is. They're called Democrats.
Well, no, the reality, again, is the GOP is Trump's party. He has actually put in place since 2016. He has been working to have the systems in place to most favor him in the election ahead. So even with her, I think she has maybe more confidence than she should in South Carolina because she was a popular 2-term governor, but that was many years ago. It's a very different state now. I think she's hoping to outperform there, but she is going to feel the weight of the world of pressure from her elected Republicans saying, get out of the way. It needs to be Donald Trump. What she's going to be weighing right now is there's a very real chance he's convicted in the middle of this general election cycle. If she bows out and supports him, she could be the person that the party then comes around and turns to
Well,
replace
the calendar here is also going to kill her, right? Because the South Carolina primary is not until February 24th. So, tonight is probably the night where she has the most momentum behind her. And that is only, to the point that Van was making, that you're making, Alyssa. I mean, that is only going to wane over the course of the next month as additional Republicans come out and endorse Trump, as, her donors dry up. I mean, there's essentially nothing between now and the 24th, which is part of why you hear her saying he should stand on a debate stage with me.
It feels like the death spiral that we've seen.
Is she going to be able to raise more money over the course of a month?
I'm not convinced the money runs out, but I don't think it's going to be traditional Republican donors. It's what's
the money may not run out, but let me just again stress to you all: the Republican voters have run out. They've run out of patience for this. She says things that are objectively true about Trump's, electoral history and so on and so forth. They don't care. He won electability voters. He's won immigration voters, which is the top issue in the party. And they believe Biden's going to lose to any of it. And they want to lose with the person that gives them the most dopamine when it happens.
So, the idea that Trump, well, go ahead, Van, make your point.
I do see it somewhat differently just with regard to the debate. I do think that he looks weak. Basically, there's a woman that says, I want to get you. I want to debate with you. And he looks weak running from one person, saying, look, I don't want to be involved in the big circles with a bunch of nobodies. I don't know that doesn't wind up giving her a little bit more to say. And to your point, she does not have a landing field out there anywhere past where she is right now, and it could create. So I don't want to. I think you're going to hear that. I think it may work better than we think. But go ahead, David.
Yeah, no, I'm not. The reason the debate strategy worked, and I agree, I think it was very, very smart of him, was because there were a bunch of people on the stage who attacked each other. So they were doing his work for them, and they diminished each other. It doesn't work the same way if she steps.
She's saying, "Hey, why are you scared of us, man?" Whatever.
On a stage.
I'll just remind you guys, the last one-on-one debate she got involved in was against DeSantis in Des Moines. We were there, and it hurt her. I mean, I think he hurt her that night and caused her to come in third.
Not for nothing, though. I mean, she is, as we speak, causing Donald Trump to spiral. He's been rage-truthing out against her, saying she's, turned out Democratic voters. She gets under his skin. She is the most credible challenger that he's had since 2016. The problem that she's going to face is elected Republicans who are not Donald Trump saying, listen, you're helping Biden at this point. I don't agree with that, but that's what she's going to do.
It's not just Trump's skin she's getting under. Her numbers among Republicans, like her favorability among Republicans, when you say, well, she could be there and she could be the candidate, she is making herself unacceptable to Republicans because they worship at the altar of Donald Trump.
The more you disrespect Trump, the less kind of enamored people are with you. And Kate, I really liked your point, though, about how much time there is between now and the next one, because that is when the donors sit down and say, it's been a couple of weeks. The other thing is, who's going to campaign with her? Other than Chris Sununu, like the best hype man outside of hip hop, like who is the person who's going to stand next to her over the next couple of weeks? That number is getting smaller.
The other dynamic I would expect is the Biden campaign is also going to engage Trump. The Biden campaign is going to start moving into their general election mode and is going to try to make the narrative about Trump versus Biden. And that has a psychological impact.
Should point out, former president is 10 points ahead of Nikki Haley right now in New Hampshire as continue to count all the votes. Let's go to Dana Bash.
Thanks, Anderson. And I want to bring in Kristen Holmes, who has been covering the Trump campaign, to give us information about what you're hearing, Kristen, from Trump advisors. You just heard Anderson talk about the lead now at this point widening to 10 points.
Yeah, Jen, I mean, what they had been hoping for was a double-digit lead. They want this margin to be definitive enough that, one, they can pivot to a general election. They want to focus on battleground states that are crucial in general election, Georgia, Michigan, Arizona, and two, definitive enough that it makes it so that he appears to be the presumptive nominee, essentially trying to force Nikki Haley out of the race. Now, of course, what we saw there was a very defiant Nikki Haley urging Donald Trump to debate with her, saying she was going to stay in the race, particularly through South Carolina. And I will note, when I talked to his senior advisors, they don't feel concerned necessarily that Haley would beat Trump out for the nomination. They just believe this is going to prolong the process. They particularly feel strongly about South Carolina. I do want to remind you, one of the strategies that Trump's team used here in New Hampshire was essentially getting Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina to endorse him before the New Hampshire primary and then come out and stump for Donald Trump, endorsing him, essentially trying to send a message that the people of South Carolina, including Tim Scott, are backing Donald Trump. Again, part of a larger message he's been trying to send, that it's time for the Republican Party to coalesce behind him. The other part of this is that we are expecting him to come out at some point sooner rather than later. We know that they are still watching to see exactly what those margins land at. As I said earlier, they're hoping for double digits. They said anything above 7% would be considered a victory for them. The one thing we should really listen to, earlier today, Donald Trump said he would never ask an opponent to drop out of the race. So we'll be listening to see what he says tonight. We already gotten a note out from his super PAC calling for her to drop out of the race. He's already fundraising, saying that he won the state of New Hampshire and it's time to move forward. It's time to go on and take on Biden. But that will be interesting to see if he actually calls for her directly, which he has not done, to drop out of the race.
Really interesting. That's one of the many things we're going to be listening for when the former president begins to speak. Thanks so much for that reporting, Kristen. And Casey, she mentioned the former president's super PAC. I spoke with the executive director of Nikki Haley's super PAC, SFA, who says they're on to South Carolina. They've got millions. They're going to spend it on ads, on direct mail, and also made the point that, and this seems to be the very obvious talking point from Team Haley, one of them tonight, that we don't have the final numbers, but if it is the case at the end of the night that Donald Trump doesn't get above 50%, that shows that he is weak as a former president who did that here and also in Iowa.
Yeah, I mean, and in speaking with they're clearly trying to send a message, the super PAC, hey, we're going to be there for you. You want to come down here, we'll be there. We've got your back, right? And they have to do that with us. They can't do it with the campaign directly. They say they've been stewarding resources. But, I think as we get out of this, first of all, that 10%, like the margin, it's going to be a psychological threshold, right? If she can keep it within single digits, I think there's probably going to be more money for people like Mark Harris and the Nikki Haley super PAC to spend than if it's a 10 point, even if it's just 10 points. There's something about it that potentially makes a difference here. And then she's going to have to see how the polls move as she goes back to her home state, because there is going to be something for her about going into staying on a ballot where she's potentially facing a loss that's embarrassing. If it's even worse, it could be, Chris, I think you and I were having a conversation. I mean, it could be humiliating for her, right? If she goes to South Carolina and really doesn't do well. So there is going to be a decision point for her, but I don't think it's
and they have time. It's in a month.
Do you know what the latest poll is in South Carolina? Trump 61, Haley 25. I mean, we're not talking about something close. We're talking about 36-point difference. The governor of the state is for Trump. One senator, a Republican senator, is for Trump. The other Republican senator is for Trump. And, look, it was really good, really smart, really effective speech. But I remember 8 days ago in Iowa where Ron DeSantis said, and I got my ticket punched and I'm on my way out of Iowa. And last time I checked, he's dropped out of the race. This is 4+ weeks that she has to stay in a state. And one of the things the Trump people point out is they say, it's not like she's some new candidate who could go down there and say, hey, I'm Nikki Haley, listen to me. Everybody in the state knows her. Everybody has an opinion about her. They're not going to be introducing her to the voters of South Carolina. And just, at least right now, they don't want her.
I think a couple of things. One, talking to Haley advisors as we've been sitting here watching her speech, they are looking at a couple of things come morning. How much did that speech tonight generate in terms of fundraising? What are the dollars out there? So the money and the margin, that is going to determine her path forward. She's scheduled a rally in North Charleston tomorrow by design, so she has a place to go. She's going home to fight, not to retreat. But of course, we've heard every candidate in years past, they're always going forward until they're not. I would say one caution about the polls. Those polls you mentioned were all taken before the voting began. There's no current South Carolina polling. It's likely perhaps even gotten more extreme. I mean, so we don't know, but let's just hold off on the polling. But I do think that there is a sense she's not a current office holder like Ron DeSantis. She has held office. This is likely her shot. So whatever she has coming next, that she, as long as this doesn't damage her, they're going to keep forward here. But I think margin and money is what's going to determine this.
The other thing to watch too, I think, Dana, we saw John Cornyn, who's waiting in the wings to potentially be the next Senate minority or majority leader, endorsed Donald Trump, which was clearly not necessarily the easiest thing for him. He had held out this long. I think one of the other forces at play is going to be, does this parade of endorsements that Trump is rolling out continue? Is there really not any place or anyone for Nikki Haley to call and say, come stand next to me? There are going to be fewer and fewer of them.
One of the other, excuse me, I just forgot to say, one of the other points is, and the Trump people make, running one-on-one against Donald Trump is not the easiest thing in the world, as we've seen from little Marco and lying Ted and all of that. So, yes, she's gotten the one-on-one race she said she wanted. Running one-on-one against Donald Trump and all that he's willing, she took some shots at him today about mental fitness and chaos and all the 80-year-old. I suspect he'll be returning fire maybe tonight and certainly in the weeks ahead.
It is only January in a season that sometimes, in 2008 on the Democratic side, it took until May. So in that sense, in that context, it is early. However, what I'm hearing from the Trump folks is some impatience about not necessarily the votes going on, because they feel comfortable and confident that at the end of the day, at this point, he will be the nominee. The impatience is with getting the spigot turned on at the Republican National Committee, at the RNC, and starting to get all of the money, all of the movement, everything, the data that they have to help, because the Biden campaign is very much already in general election mode. His campaign manager, Julie Chavez Rodriguez, called while our colleagues were talking and said that we are ready to go. From our vantage point, it's clear whoever the nominee is, that they hope that the Democrats or the voters will reject. Anderson?
All right, Dana, I'll take it. And I want to go to MJ Lee now because obviously Biden is declared on the Democratic side the winner of a primary in which he was not even competing, MJ. Nonetheless, the winner, delegates not at stake, but symbolically significant, perhaps in some sense, especially given that today was the first day he actually appeared on the campaign trail with the vice president for his reelection bid.
Yeah, Aaron, honestly, the Biden campaign isn't even responding to the Democratic side of things in New Hampshire. All they have responded to is the Republican primary in New Hampshire. We've just gotten the statement from the campaign, and it is pretty black and white. It says tonight's results confirm Donald Trump has all but locked up the GOP nomination, and the election-denying anti-freedom MAGA movement has completed its takeover of the Republican Party. In other words, Aaron, for the Biden campaign, it doesn't matter whether Nikki Haley is insisting that she is going to be staying in the Republican race. In their eyes, this is all but done. They are making the hard pivot to the general election. And we have some new reporting that further shows this in the form of big changes that are coming to the campaign. We are learning that 2 top West Wing aides will be moving over full-time to the campaign. That includes Jen O'Malley Dillon. She, of course, ran the president's 2020 campaign and is currently the deputy chief of staff. She's going to be moving over as the campaign chair. And Mike Donnellan, who you might know as just one of the most senior advisors to the president in his innermost circle, he is going to be moving over to the campaign as chief strategist. Now, we are told that these moves have been under discussion for weeks, but particularly for JOD, Jen O'Malley Dillon, that departure could actually come sooner than was previously expected because the campaign is seeing Trump consolidate the Republican race so quickly. One advisor tells me that this is a moment that they see as an all hands on deck moment. And in their eyes, Aaron, this is already a race between Donald Trump and Joe Biden.
All right, MJ, thanks so much. And here with our panel, I mean, it is pretty amazing when you think about it and how Biden is even treating it, right? 2 races in, 2 for 2, as close as it is, that they're already moving forward as if this is the general Trump Biden.
Look, the statement that the Biden campaign gave was basically like, this race is over, and we're ready for the general, and we're going after Donald Trump. I mean, that's their reaction. That's there's lots of questions about whether or not they actually think that he would be easier to beat than Nikki Haley. I think a lot of that discussion is kind of silly because at the end of the day, if Nikki Haley got the nomination, who knows what Donald Trump's reaction would be, and who knows whether he would run independent or his voters would stay home, or who knows.
Total
Yeah.
chaos.
It does dovetail with the Biden campaign's, best message in their view, which is that this is Trump's Republican Party, that this is a wholly owned subsidiary of Donald Trump, and that no one can get out from under that. That's what they are saying in their statement tonight. So they're ready to go with that message. I mean, the consistent thing between 2020, 2022, and today is that Biden is running on Trump basically being a danger to democracy and doubling down on that, and also painting with a pretty broad brush, saying that all of his enablers in the Republican Party are allowing this to happen. They are just going to start on that tomorrow. That is, I mean, maybe it's not day one because they've been doing that for a while, but it's day one as far as the general election is concerned for the Biden campaign.
Well, I will say, I mean, yes, they're turning to this. And the thing, though, with Nikki Haley saying, I'm not getting out yet, means the Trump campaign cannot turn to the general election. They have got to spend however long she is going to be in this race. I'm not sure people are really confident that it will be until South Carolina, her home state, which is in several weeks from now. It's a very long stretch of period. It is a real question on what donors are going to do, but it would cause the Trump campaign to still have to keep their attention and their resources on this primary race. For Nikki Haley, though, I think it's a real question of what the next few weeks are going to look like. Ralph Norman is one of her lone holdouts still supporting her. It's going to be a tough few weeks for him if he's the only surrogate out there pushing for her. Obviously, Chris Sununu won't be as an effective surrogate post New Hampshire. And I was just looking at a comment that something that people have been paying close attention to is what the donors say, because they do have a lot of influence on these candidates. And when they stop calling, or they're calling and saying it's time for you to get out of the race, it often sends a pretty strong message. And Ken Langone, the co-founder of Home Depot, was saying that he was ready to give Haley a nice sum of money, as he put it to the Financial Times. But he said if she didn't get traction in New Hampshire tonight, which Trump has a pretty comfortable lead, that was not going to happen, because he's equated it to throwing money down a rat hole, was the word that he used.
I also don't think we should discount the significance of this moment, the turnaround for Donald Trump within the Republican Party. I mean, right after January 6th, I was in the Capitol in January 6th, right after the attack, talking to senators, talking to House members. They were done with them. Republicans were absolutely done with him. They thought he was a pariah within the party. They did not think that he was going to come back. And then his impeachment trial, many of them didn't vote to convict him because they thought there's no way he could turn things around. Well, if you look at the last 2 states, of course, he did. Republican voters overwhelmingly voting for him. And I spent the day today just talking to a lot of Republican senators about why that is, including Senator John Cornyn, who did endorse him tonight, Trump tonight. He said that the Republican base just views Trump as a disruptor. That was the words of John Cornyn, which is why, even though he was an incumbent, essentially an incumbent candidate, that they believe that he could come up and fight Washington the way that other candidates cannot. So all the things that happened in the past, people viewing him as toast, not able to come back, clearly turning around today is a story that we shouldn't.
And we are standing by to hear from Donald Trump himself after his projected win in the New Hampshire Republican primary. Nikki Haley just challenged him to debate. Will he respond? We'll find out ahead.
I come from MAGA world. I was a MAGA base cult member, baby. I was part of that world, and I left that world, and now, am an opponent of Trump's. Most of the Never Trumpers were never part of that MAGA cult. I was. True. I voted for Trump in 2016 because the same people who voted for him voted for me. I felt like Trump did. The system's fucking broken. Burn it down. Both parties suck. I wanted, Adam, maybe you did too, I wanted disruption in our political system. I think disruption's good. Yeah. Turns out Trump is an evil disruptor. And I did not pay enough attention to that. Once he got elected, I started paying attention to him. And even though Helsinki was my final straw, a month into his presidency, I came home from doing my radio show, sat down at dinner with my wife. I looked at her and I said, this isn't going to end well for us.
When it comes to the faith side of things, I still hold my faith very dear. And the reason is look, I think my faith has been so perverted, by the way. Donald Trump has been turned into the new Jesus Christ. He's the new moral stick everybody measures up against. And my belief is look, you have to treat the Jesus of the Bible I grew up reading actually treated the poor very compassionately. He had compassion for immigrants. He actually, wasn't obsessed with politics. This is, by the way, a fairly new journey of my life, is recognizing that you can be a Christian in politics, or you can be a religious person in politics, but you don't bring your religion to politics. I've always known that part. I was a man of faith in a secular position, so I have to act like that. But this has been so perverted and turned into Christian nationalism. And what I saw, I can look back at 1992 and see, I went to the Christian Coalition meeting, which was basically you had in essence, a failure of the moral majority, which was Falwell's group. And then the Christian Coalition was Pat Robertson's answer to that. And this was the first time that George H.W. Bush came and actually spoke to the group. And it was the first time that you really saw mainstream Republican politics openly court evangelicals. Now, look, even at the thing, he said, we don't want to go back to the days of Ozzie and Harriet. So he held true to what he really believed. But that was an open signal to the Christian right that we need you, you're part of this movement. And that's fine until the Christian right made a decision to take over the party. And that's what's happened over the last, frankly, 15 years. And I can look back and see the different iterations of that. But now we're in a moment where, my goodness, the GOP doesn't represent the GOP that you and I remember. It doesn't represent the party of fiscal discipline. It's the party of let's make somehow Christianity the national religion, but it's not a true Christianity.
I always grew up with a Democratic Party that was more the party of government. And now we're at this place where the Republican Party is every bit as much of a big government party, but the Republican Party more dangerously is further down the road of authoritarianism. Doing what I did 5 or 6 years ago, leaving Trump, leaving the Republican Party, I lost virtually all of my supporters and followers and friends.
Right.
And one of the primary dividing points was, and they would tell me this every day, they still do, like, I want certain policies, but I don't want a king or a dictator to have the power to give me that. Adam, I get so many of these folks who tell me directly, Joe, I don't care if Trump's a king, comma, as long as he gives us what we need and what I want. That's a hard red line. No, but it's an authoritarian party now, clearly.